Chapter 91. Boys in high school were always a little chinibu. Of course, everyone had gone through that age. At this age, most boys only had 3 things to do: study, attract girls' attention, and prepare for college. Of course, for some sports students, studying was secondary. As long as they played well, there would always be a college that would want them. Therefore, attracting girls' attention was the most important thing. The boy named John was the same. This guy's family had some money. His father was a small manager in the operations department of the Celtics. Although he wasn't very rich, he had no worries. He used this reason to get a lot of tickets to the Celtics. He even joined the Celtics for training. Of course, the so-called training was just being a caddy. Sometimes, the assistant coaches and star players would give him a few pointers. It was because of this environment that he naturally had some understanding of the private lives of rich people. He didn't have a good impression of these people who liked to play with girls. When he first found out that Jiang Hai was the owner of a manor, he only cared about Jiang Hai. However, when he learned from Delia that Jiang Hai's manor was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, he became a little hostile towards Jiang Hai. The reason why he did this was also related to Delia's attitude towards Jiang Hai. In his opinion, there was no such thing as pure friendship between men and women. Right now, Delia just didn't dislike Jiang Hai. Who knew when they would hold hands? After all, he wasn't that old, but he was much more mature than them. Moreover, he lived alone and was a very rich man. For a little girl like Delia, he was a fatal attraction. There were countless scenes like this in American dramas. He didn't have much of a way to deal with a rich man like Jiang Hai, so he could only think of a way to deal with Delia. A fly wouldn't bite a seamless egg. If Delia's position was firm enough, Jiang Hai, the fly, wouldn't be able to do anything. Originally, he just wanted to send Delia away. However, when he saw Jiang Hai's clothes, he knew that Jiang Hai definitely wasn't here to watch the game. He also looked at Jiang Hai's height. He wasn't very tall and looked weak. This kind of person probably didn't know how to play basketball. Especially when Jiang Hai hesitated and said that he wasn't here to watch the game, he was even more certain. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind. He wanted to let Delia know that he was better than Jiang Hai. Therefore, he took the initiative to invite Jiang Hai to play basketball. At the same time, he retreated from the court as he spoke. "Hey, I'm not here to..." Hearing this guy's words, Jiang Hai wasn't stupid. He naturally understood the meaning behind it. He just wanted to humiliate him on the basketball court. However, Jiang Hai really wasn't in the mood to play this jealous game with this kind of kid. Therefore, he was about to open his mouth to refuse, but the other party obviously didn't give him the chance to do so. "Hey, everyone, quiet down. Although I'm not from Winthrop, I know that there's a big farmer in Winthrop with a net worth of over 100 million. Today, the richest young man in Winthrop is here. What do you guys say? Should we let him come up and show us what he's got?" Jiang Hai was only halfway through his words when John roared. Hearing his roar, the originally lively scene instantly quieted down. Many people looked at the entrance. Jiang Hai's figure in winter clothes appeared in front of them. It's really him. The owner of Green Forest Manor? When they saw Jiang Hai, most people's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion. This was because, although Jiang Hai was a rich man, he usually didn't show off. The people in town who knew him could be counted on one hand. Speaking of which, after Jiang Hai came here, the most popular thing he did was to beat up Faraday and the others and send them to prison. This was definitely not a good thing in Winthrop. Therefore, for a while, the crowd here didn't have a good first impression of Jiang Hai, but they basically maintained a neutral state. They only knew that this was a rich Wuxia man, but no one knew the specifics. Now, most of these people were seeing Jiang Hai for the first time. F***ck. Seeing these people's gazes, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curse in Chinese. Is this guy crazy? I didn't provoke him, nor did I provoke him. Why is he so jealous of me? It could be said that Jiang Hai was completely uninterested in this kind of high school love triangle. He had no interest in beating up a high school student. Not all rich people were like the guy who drove a Mercedes-Benz in Initial D who had such a bad taste. He wasn't young now. He was already 27 years old and he was married once. He was completely uninterested in a jealous person who was almost 10 years younger than him. However, this didn't mean that he would choose to back down when someone came looking for trouble. It was like an adult strolling on the street and seeing a naughty kid causing trouble. If the kid didn't hurt him, he would at most laugh and scold him for being a naughty kid. Then he would just pass by. But now this naughty kid ran over and slapped him. He couldn't bear it anymore. If he didn't teach this kid how to behave, how could he survive in this area in the future? "I can play basketball, but I don't wear sneakers," Jiang Hai said lightly as he shrugged to John in front of him. "We can lend you some." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John thought that Jiang Hai was just looking for excuses, so he took the initiative to speak. Okay, size 9.5 shoes. Seeing that John was determined to make a fool of himself, Jiang Hai didn't care. Whether he could win or not was another matter, but if he just ran away he would look down on himself. I'll take it one step at a time. My physical fitness is so strong now. Although I haven't played basketball for a while, my performance shouldn't be too bad. Muttering in his heart, Jiang Hai walked to the sidelines. Wuxia's shoe size is based on the United Kingdoms, but in addition to the United Kingdom and Wuxia, Europe and the United States have their own shoe sizes. Jiang Hai originally wore a size 45 shoe, which is a size 9.5 shoes in the United States. When Jiang Hai walked to the bench next to him, John had already come over with a pair of Nike Hyperdunk. These shoes are also old. It looks like they should belong to a fan or a substitute of the two teams. Jiang Hai didn't care so much about these. He casually took off his shoes here, then took off his outer clothes, leaving only the hoodie he was wearing inside, then walked to the court and casually took a basketball sent by John. Jiang Hai began to dribble it. Unfortunately, since he became stronger, Jiang Hai hasn't played basketball yet. When he dribbled the ball, Jiang Hai knew that his sense of the ball was almost zero. Sure enough, after dribbling a few times, the ball hit his foot and bounced out. Ah! At this time, everyone on the court was paying attention to Jiang Hai. Seeing that Jiang Hai couldn't even dribble the ball, these people couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai didn't care. After picking up the ball again, he slowly dribbled it. At this time, the 3v3 on the other side couldn't help but stop and start to pay attention to this side. When the person named Avery and Bradley saw Jiang Hai's clumsy dribble, he couldn't help but shake his head. Even some elementary school students can dribble more fluently than Jiang Hai. The reason why he chose to come today was partly because of John's request, but he also felt a little sad in his heart. Today his original big brother, Rajan Lando, was traded. Although he knew about this for a long time, it didn't mean that he could accept this fact. He felt a little sad in his heart. So when he was in a bad mood, it was also a good choice to go out and relieve his boredom. Now that he saw a rich man about to be abused, it was also a very interesting thing for him. Then he gestured to the people around him to stop playing. Then he sat on the bench in the distance and watched the situation on the court. After Jiang Hai practiced for about 5 minutes, he felt a little more comfortable, but because his body had become too strong, he still couldn't dribble the ball easily. In other words, his consciousness still couldn't keep up with his body. For example, a computer has 128 gigabytes of memory, but the system he uses is XP. It can only recognize 2 gigabytes of memory and the rest is useless. Jiang Hai is currently in such a state. After 5 minutes he finally managed to dribble the ball forward without hitting his feet, but he still felt very uncomfortable. Are you done? At this time, John couldn't help but come over and ask Jiang Hai with a smile. Okay, take your time to get used to it. Hearing John's words, Jiang Hai nodded. He felt embarrassed to keep him waiting here. Then you first. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John laughed and said to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai didn't care. He dribbled the ball directly to the 3-point line. After pushing the ball to John, John returned the ball to him. This is called washing the ball, the most basic thing in a one-on-one game. Although Jiang Hai's software can't keep up with the hardware, he still understands the rules of playing. Holding the ball, Jiang Hai began to dribble, but just as he dribbled, John over there had already snatched it. Looking at his bold way of stealing, if it was in the past, Jiang Hai couldn't say that he could pass him in an instant, but at least it wouldn't be a problem for him to protect the ball. But now he wants to protect the ball. His body reacted, but the ball didn't come over. With a tap of John's finger, the ball escaped from Jiang Hai's control, and then it was caught by John. Today's first update, 2 chapters in a row. Everyone please support me and collect more. Chapter 92. Woo! Seeing that Jiang Hai lost the ball as soon as he came up, everyone couldn't help but start to whine. This time they finally understood that John wanted to cause trouble for Jiang Hai. The Americans weren't good people either. At the very least, they were still very willing to watch such a scene. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai shook his head. Their brains couldn't keep up. However, he didn't say anything. He just returned to the 3-second zone and prepared to defend. Although his awareness wasn't good on the offensive side, his body was a great weapon on the defensive side. Continue? Holding the ball, John stood outside the 3-point line and said to Jiang Hai with a smile on his face. Continue? Jiang Hai also nodded. It was just a broken ball. This was nothing. After reshuffling the ball, John slowly dribbled the ball to the 3-point line. He was very relaxed now because in his opinion, Jiang Hai was a newbie that couldn't be any newbie. Against such a person he should be able to easily crush him. However, the moment his foot stepped into the three-point line, Jiang Hai's body had already rushed over and blocked in front of him. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, John subconsciously protected the ball. Seeing that Jiang Hai wasn't going to attack him, he was ready to break through. The ball was in his left hand and instantly bounced back to his right hand. His body leaned to the left and was about to dribble the ball to the left to break through. However, the moment he was about to succeed, Jiang Hai's body flashed and blocked in front of him again. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, John was stunned. Avery and Bradley was also stunned because this action just now made everyone's eyes light up. Again? After his first breakthrough was blocked, John attacked again. He took a step back and dribbled the ball twice in a row. Then he tilted to the left and after a big stretch he broke through to the right. This was his ultimate move. Unfortunately, when he pulled the ball to the left, Jiang Hai's body clearly moved to the base. However, the moment he pulled the ball back, Jiang Hai's body appeared on the right and blocked in front of him. The fake move was once again nullified under Jiang Hai's defense. However, at this time, it was too late for John to pull his body back. He could only force a breakthrough. However, when his body leaned against Jiang Hai's body, he was about to curse. He even suspected that Jiang Hai had stuffed a few bricks into his body. He felt a sharp pain in his shoulder when he bumped into Jiang Hai. He couldn't help but stop his breakthrough. However, if he stopped completely and was forced by Jiang Hai, it would be easier for him to continue. So, he could only force himself to bump into Jiang Hai's chest and then use the rebound force to complete a turn-back jump shot in the air. Almost no one in the NBA could do such a move, let alone a high school student. From John's point of view, he didn't consider whether the ball would go in or not. He only knew that he had to throw the ball out. Even if it didn't touch the 3 points, it would be considered an attack. However, Jiang Hai didn't intend to let him complete the attack so easily. When the ball was released, the point of release was very far back. By the time it flew over Jiang Hai's head, it was estimated to be at least 3.5 meters away from the ground. At this time, more than 99% of people wouldn't choose to intercept it because they couldn't stop it. It would be better to just watch it fly over. If it went in, then forget it. If it didn't go in, then pick it up. In the past, Jiang Hai would also make such a choice. After all, it was too high. But now, when Jiang Hai saw the basketball, a voice in his mind said, "You can touch it." What was the highest height that a human could jump? No one was particularly clear about this, but the jumping ability of NBA players was probably the strongest among all the professions on Earth. The best among them even claimed that the sky was their limit. But how high could these best people jump? 1 meter? 2 meters? 3 meters? That was already the limit. But what about Jiang Hai? If someone measured with a ruler, they would realize that Jiang Hai's head had completely surpassed the basket behind him. At this moment, the flat basket and the kissing basket were nothing. Jiang Hai's chest was almost at the height of the basket. It was so high. How high did Jiang Hai jump? At least 5 meters. This was the number that everyone who saw this scene calculated in their hearts. John, who was in front of Jiang Hai, was shocked when he saw Jiang Hai's movements. When Jiang Hai jumped, Jiang Hai's feet were almost at his waist. What kind of monster is this? Now John just wanted to yell, but Jiang Hai didn't give him such a chance. After Jiang Hai flew into the air, his right hand gently grabbed the basketball in the air and firmly grabbed it into his arms. "It's my turn to attack." When he landed again, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth slightly raised as he said indifferently, "Oh my God, what's going on with this guy? Is he flying? Quick, pinch me. I want to see if I'm dreaming. How high did that guy jump just now?" It's a Guinness World Record, an absolute world record. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, everyone started cheering. How could they not be moved when they saw such a miracle happen? "It's your turn." Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the young man named John couldn't help but stutter. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai laughed and walked back to the three-point line. After washing the ball, he rushed inside. His idea was very simple. He never thought that he could jump so high before. Although after obtaining the true dragon's soul, his physical fitness has reached the limit of human beings, but he didn't do a proper test. He didn't know how strong he was. Now that he knew that his jump was so amazing, what else could he say? He should just go straight inside and get him. However, he had overlooked a problem, and that was that his dribbling was simply too bad. It was ridiculously bad. After running a few steps, he was forced to stop by John in front of him. He had no choice. In order not to be intercepted, he could only turn around and let the ball move away from him and John. It was the same as when he watched on TV in the past. He always saw the Chinese defenders doing the same thing when facing the American defenders in the World Series. They let the ball move away from the opponent but also away from their own bodies. There was no way to be intercepted, but their offense was also blocked. If Jiang Hai saw this scene in the past, he would probably be cursing. However, he really didn't feel that there was anything wrong with what he did. Feeling the power from John behind him, Jiang Hai curled his lips. If he had practiced his dribbling earlier, it wouldn't have been difficult for him to knock John away or dodge him with his strength and speed. However, what should he do now? He definitely couldn't break through. It would be troublesome if the ball didn't go in when he went over. He couldn't force it either. It would be an offensive foul. For a moment, Jiang Hai was in a difficult situation just like John just now. Although there was no time limit in the singles, Jiang Hai was a person with integrity. Therefore, after hesitating for a moment, he decided to shoot. It couldn't go in. Therefore he stopped dodging and got the ball back. Under John's gaze, he jumped up with all his strength and prepared to shoot. John was waiting for Jiang Hai to shoot. He was just shown off by Jiang Hai. If he didn't return the favor now, he wouldn't play. Therefore he also used all his strength and jumped up. It would be a foul if he went forward, so he could only jump up. This young man named John was about 1.96 meters tall. He was taller than Jiang Hai, but it was obviously not enough for him to restrain Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's jump when he shot was also very high. Although it wasn't as high as before, his face was completely exposed outside the opponent's defensive range. Looking at the basket in front of him, Jiang Hai's finger pressed on the information reflected by his cerebral cortex. With a casual shake, the basketball flew out high like a guided missile. Shwa! With a soft sound, the basketball almost didn't even touch the basket and went straight into the net. Oh! It went in. Hello. What a beautiful adaptive eclipse. Wow. As soon as the ball went in, the onlookers couldn't help but shout. Such a tit-for-tat adaptive eclipse was really picturesque. Otherwise, McGrady wouldn't have been called the most elegant player. After landing, Jiang Hai didn't celebrate. Instead, he looked at his hand. When he was flying in the air, his only thought was to shoot the ball in. However, when he saw the basket, before he had time to command his strength, the basketball had already flown out. It was thrown out according to his subconscious distribution of strength, which made Jiang Hai feel very strange. He suddenly had a feeling that he was invincible in the world when it came to shooting. My luck is really good. Again. Looking at Jiang Hai's basketball, John couldn't help but say with some jealousy. Then he picked up the basketball, walked to the three-point line and passed the ball to Jiang Hai again. He was going to attack. Jiang Hai also withdrew his thoughts and looked at John with a smile. Now he suddenly wanted to try his shooting ability, and to try he needed to attack. So this time he was ready to finish John quickly. After John took the ball, he took a deep breath and used almost all his strength to change directions in front of Jiang Hai. Then he prepared to charge in. But when he looked up again, he found that Jiang Hai had already appeared in front of him, even though he had made his move later. Today's second update is continuously delivered. Please collect, please collect, please collect, please collect, please collect, please collect. Chapter 93. Pa. Without giving John much time to react, Jiang Hai had already gently poked the basketball out of his hand. When the basketball landed, Jiang Hai also grabbed it in his hands immediately, then walked out of the three-point line with a smile. Seeing this scene, John was dumbfounded. It seemed that he had gone too far. However, Jiang Hai did not give him too much time to think about this. After walking out of the three-point line, he handed the ball to him. It was time to wash the ball. After washing the ball, Jiang Hai did not break through this time. Instead, he stood directly outside the three-point line with the ball and jumped high. Shwa! Under John's puzzled gaze, Jiang Hai's wrist shook, and the basketball drew a beautiful arc and went straight into the basket. It still did not touch the basket and went straight through the net. Oh, John is going to be shot. Oh my God, another one. If it was a lucky shot, it might have been a lucky shot. However, if it was 2 consecutive shots, it was unlikely that it was a lucky shot. John looked at Jiang Hai and could not help but grit his teeth. He was the one who started it, so he had to grit his teeth and finish it. Unfortunately, as Jiang Hai adapted to his body again, John's fighting power was infinitely reduced. John attacked again. Although he was prepared and did not let Jiang Hai poke the ball, his shot was blocked by Jiang Hai again. When Jiang Hai attacked, after washing the ball, John stood directly on the three-point line to defend, but Jiang Hai took the initiative to take a step back. When he was about half a meter away from the three-point line, he jumped and shot, but the ball was still unstoppable like before. What the F asterisk CK, what's going on? John's teammates on the sidelines were stunned, and they all opened their mouths in surprise. Even Avery Bradley, who was originally sitting there, looked at Jiang Hai on the court with a face of surprise. When he saw Jiang Hai just now, he was still a beginner among beginners. How did his defense suddenly improve, and at the same time he shot so fiercely? This shouldn't be the case. However, Jiang Hai was not in the mood to explain this to them. After blocking another shot from John, Jiang Hai took another step back this time. He was almost at the center of the hoop. Then he ignored John in front of him and jumped again. Using the same action as before, he threw the basketball in. In the next round, Jiang Hai took another step back and stood in the center circle. With the same action, the basketball hit the target again. What the hell is this? Seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the crowd was about to go crazy. They had watched basketball games for so many years, but this was the first time they had seen how basketball was played. However, in the next round, when Jiang Hai stood in the center circle in his own half of the court, his shot did not go in. The basketball hit the hoop, but this time, it hit the inside of the hoop and bounced straight out. Although it did not go in, it was very similar. However, in his heart he had a rough idea of what was going on. At present he had already scored 5 goals. The score on the court was 5-0. After defending against John's offense, Jiang Hai was not at the three-point line on this side of the court, but in the corner of the court. After getting the ball, he scored another 3 points. This time the basketball was like the previous 5 times. There was almost no hesitation and it went straight into the hoop. It was the same on the right side, the left side, and the 2 bottom corners. A 100% three-point conversion rate in the half court? What the hell is this? John was so shocked that he was at a loss for words. He felt like he was no longer in a competition with a human being. Even the audience was dumbfounded. What was going on? They had played basketball for so many years, but this was the first time they knew that basketball could be played this way. Where did this guy come from? How could he be so fierce? It was too unreasonable. I once watched a Japanese cartoon. There was a green-haired Japanese teenager who could make 3-point shots in the entire court. His accuracy was 100%. Only someone with super jumping ability could stop him. I always thought that it was a fantasy-themed cartoon, but I think I was wrong. Such a guy really exists. Is he using witchcraft to play? Seeing Jiang Hai score 10 points in a row, a black teenager in the audience asked the person next to him with a blank face. The person next to him had obviously seen this before, but he did not know how to answer. If Jiang Hai heard him, he would probably tell him that he had seen the cartoon before, and it was indeed a fantasy-themed cartoon. It was just that he was realistic. The final ball was 10 o'clock. John had already given up. He was only trying to help Jiang Hai with the ball. At this time, Jiang Hai did not think so. He had always wanted to try a dunk, but unfortunately he had never succeeded. This was because he could not break through John's defense with his dribbling. Now that he saw that John was not focused, Jiang Hai knew that his chance had come. At that moment, without saying anything, he broke through with the ball. Although his dribbling speed was very slow, his explosive power was strong, and his steps were big. Before John could react, he had already taken 3 steps with the ball in his hands. 1 step, 2 steps, and he jumped. Jiang Hai almost stepped on the free throw line and jumped high. In the past, he had only heard of jumping from the free throw line, but Jiang Hai had never done it before. When he was in the air, Jiang Hai looked at the basket in front of him, getting closer and closer. Not to mention, there was a trace of excitement in his heart. In the past, when he played basketball, he could not even grab the basket, let alone a dunk. At most, he could use one hand to hit the backboard, but he could not do it with both hands. But now he could easily complete a dunk from the free throw line. This feeling was great. With a loud bang, Jiang Hai's body arched like a bow, and the basketball in his hand was heavily poured into the basket. The huge impact shook the basket in an instant. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai could not help but cry out in excitement. However, to the audience, Jiang Hai's jump from the free throw line did not seem to be a big deal. This was because they already knew that Jiang Hai's jump was not bad. Moreover, where were they? This was the United States, a country with 0 muscles. There were people everywhere who jumped from the free throw line. If they did not believe it, they could go to the streets of New York or California to take a look. If there were not 100 people with this ability, there were at least 80, not to mention some hidden masters. Among the street ballers, there were countless people who could turn 720 degrees for a dunk, let alone jump from the free throw line for a tomahawk. Compared to jumping from the free throw line for a dunk, they were more concerned about Jiang Hai's 3-point shot that covered half the court. It was really too fierce. Among these people was Avery Bradley. Compared to football, basketball appeared much later, so there were no century-old clubs. The fact that they had not existed for a long time meant that they did not have their own home culture. In the entire NBA, most of the teams were established in the 60s and 70s. Up until now, they had only been around for about 50 years. They were far from having their own team culture. After all, they had not even been around for 60 years. How could they say that? In the NBA, there were only a total of 6 teams that were qualified to say that. The Los Angeles Lakers joined the NBA in 1948. The Golden State Warriors were born in Philadelphia in 1946. The Detroit Pistons joined the NBA in 1948. The Philadelphia 76ers formed the Syracuse Nation in 1937. The New York Knicks joined the NBA in 1946. Finally, there was the Celtics. In 1946, the owners of 11 ice hockey teams decided to form a new basketball league. At that time, the Celtics came into being. From the beginning, the Celtics were the symbol of the league. They were the temple of basketball. They were the highest honor. Unlike the other league, the Lakers, the Celtics were not a team that operated to cater to the market. Their goal was to win and then to make money. They did not want to be bad just for the sake of being bad. Whether they could win or not was another matter, but they would not destroy themselves in order to pursue a high draft. This was also the reason why the Celtics had experienced ups and downs over the years, but their fans were unusually determined. They knew that these guys were working hard. The Celtics had not been the number 1 pick since 1950. From this point, it could be seen that in the Celtics dictionary, there was no such thing as being bad. Avery knew this, so he was a little depressed. He knew that the Celtics could not get good enough stars through the draft. They could only rely on the team's own training and trades. How long would they have to wait? However, now that he saw Jiang Hai, Avery Bradley suddenly felt his eyes light up. An idea popped into his mind. If he could get Jiang Hai into the team, what would happen? Once this idea popped up, it was like a prairie fire that could not be stopped. After Jiang Hai scored the last shot, Bradley stood up and walked toward Jiang Hai. "Hey young man, I think you're almost done warming up. Let's play a 3-on-3 game." Hearing Avery Bradley's words, everyone was stunned. Then the high school students and their parents looked at the court with excitement. Okay. As for Jiang Hai, he had just gotten the feeling and was now addicted to it. Hearing Avery Bradley's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's agreement, Bradley waved to the people next to him who were playing a 3-on-3 game. Those people were the core members of the two teams. They were very self-aware. One of the original 5 people stepped down and only 4 came up. They all looked eager to give it a try. As for John, who was originally very strong, but now had a serious setback, he could only go to the bench and calm down a little. As the two teams were divided, the 3-on-3 game officially began. Bradley and Jiang Hai were divided into 2 teams. When the game started, Bradley took the initiative to defend against Jiang Hai. He wanted to see how good Jiang Hai was. If he was as good as he was against John, then he would take action. Today's first update, someone said that Xiao Fei was not suitable to write about basketball. Well, book friends are the most important. Today's update, 2 chapters in a row. Chapter 94. Serve. Because Bradley was a professional NBA player and a starter, he took the initiative to give the ball to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai stood in the center circle and passed the ball to a short black man on his side. Of course, he was only short in comparison. Compared to Jiang Hai, he was actually a little taller. He was about 1.9 meters tall and played the role of a point guard on the court. Nobody knew when it started, but the main responsibility of a point guard was not to control the ball but to score. When Jiang Hai first watched basketball, if a starting point guard did not average 7 assists per game, he would be looked down upon. But he did not know when it started, but it was not okay for a point guard to average 5 or 6 assists per game. The most important thing was to score 15, 20, 25 points per game. Some point guards were even fiercer than quarterbacks when it came to scoring. One of the best was the Bulls' top scorer, Derrick Rose. He had won the MVP award by scoring explosively. Now, many of the hottest point guards in the league scored explosively. A point guard who did not score explosively was not a good point guard. Obviously, the point guard on Jiang Hai's side was such a player. After receiving the ball, he charged forward mindlessly. He plunged into the opponent's defense and was forced to stop. Fortunately, this guy's basic skills were very good. Even when he was forced to stop, he did not lose the ball. Instead, he slowly retreated. Then he looked at Jiang Hai, who was slowly walking over from the center circle. He remembered Jiang Hai's magical 3 points. Without thinking, he passed the ball to Jiang Hai. As soon as Jiang Hai took the ball, Avery Bradley immediately followed and stuck close to Jiang Hai. Hey, an active NBA star guarding against me. How honorable. Although he was a billionaire, it was the first time Jiang Hai observed an NBA player so closely. Of course, as a fake fan, he did not know much about Avery and Bradley. If it were Kobe Bryant, James, or someone like that, he would probably hesitate for a moment. That was because a person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. It was unlikely that he would be careless. But Avery Bradley. Use all your methods to beat me. Avery and Bradley said with a serious face as he tried to open his almost invisible eyes. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai did not say anything and jumped straight up. When he saw Jiang Hai jump, Avery also jumped as soon as possible. He saw clearly off the court just now. Jiang Hai's jumping ability was too strong. If he just jumped like that, he would lose. Although he played the second position on the court, he was only 1.88 meters tall, the same as Jiang Hai. With such a jump, he was definitely not Jiang Hai's opponent, so he jumped forward. After all, a basketball game was not a golf game. Although the league did not encourage physical contact, sometimes physical contact was inevitable. Bradley was not afraid of Jiang Hai saying that he fouled because this was just a normal defense in the NBA. As he pounced, his body inevitably collided with Jiang Hai. But then something even more surprising happened. He originally thought that Jiang Hai's body was not too thick and that he should not have much strength. But when he collided with Jiang Hai, although he did not use all his strength, he was the source of the force. However, it was as if he had hit a sandbag. The huge impact made Avery and Bradley lose his balance in the air and fall. In his eyes, Jiang Hai did not seem to have suffered any impact. His body just moved straight back for a while as if the collision did not cause him any trouble at all. With a flick of his wrist, the basketball flew straight to the basket in the distance with a whirlwind. With a whoosh, it was still light and crisp. It went straight into the net. Wow, F***CK. Bradley has been F***ed. Seeing this ball, the audience on the sidelines roared for the first time. They had just seen Bradley constantly abuse his classmate. Although they were cheering, they were still a little unhappy. But now that Jiang Hai had appeared, what about Bradley? What about an NBA star? Wasn't he F***ed? It could be said that Jiang Hai's shot instantly ignited the enthusiasm of the audience. Oh, good shot. On the other side, Delia also shouted with her eyes shining. John, who was sitting on the bench, looked at Delia and felt a little bitter in his mouth. Did he shoot himself in the foot? Good shot. Seeing that the ball had hit the target, Bradley nodded. Then Jiang Hai continued to serve. This time Bradley was much more serious. He did not let Jiang Hai receive the ball at all. He completely circled in front of him to defend. Of course, with Jiang Hai's speed and explosive power, he had many ways to get rid of him. However, Jiang Hai had not learned how to defend properly. For a moment he felt that it was a little troublesome. Although he did not know much about Bradley, this guy had been selected as the second best defensive player in the league. This meant that this guy had the best perimeter defense ability in the league. This year, Bradley had just renewed his contract with the Celtics. It was 4 years and $32 million. Although it was rumored that in 2 years the salary cap would be greatly increased. At this time, 4 years and $32 million was equivalent to $8 million per year. This was enough to prove his role as a perimeter defender. He was 1.88 meters tall, but his arm span was 2.05 meters. His defensive range was really large. Under Bradley's man-to-man defense, Jiang Hai did not have many ways to receive the ball. The two players on the other side played one-on-one. Unfortunately, they did not score. After the opponent snatched the rebound, he threw it to Avery and Bradley. Although Bradley had established himself in the league as a defender, his offensive ability was not particularly bad. In addition to his rookie season, he averaged 7.6 points per game in his second season. In his third season he averaged 9.2 points per game. Last season he averaged 14.9 points per game. Just like his old boss, Rondo, his three-point shot was sometimes good and sometimes not. Other than that, he had almost no weaknesses. Of course, his height was not considered a weakness. If he wanted to get rid of Jiang Hai to receive the ball, he had 100 ways. With a turn, he dodged Jiang Hai and received the ball from inside the three-point line. However, just as he was about to take the ball inside the three-point line, he saw a strong wind flash in front of him. In the next second, Jiang Hai's figure appeared in front of him. Looking at Jiang Hai's playful smile, he could not help but be surprised. What a fast speed. In the NBA there were many people who were fast. However, to be able to react so quickly and block in front of him, not only did one need to be fast but one also needed explosive power and balance. Since he had lost the opportunity to directly attack the basket, Bradley slowed down again and prepared to play one-on-one against Jiang Hai. His dribbling was much more stable than John's. Although he was mainly a shooting guard, he was still a guard. Although his dribbling skills were not superb, they were definitely not bad. In front of Jiang Hai, he kept dodging and moving. However, he did not have any opportunities to break through the basket. It was not that he did not want to, but that he could not. Too strong of an explosive power and too strong of a balance. Is he a roly-poly? Where is his center of gravity? Just as Bradley saw, Jiang Hai was a beginner who could not be more beginner. As long as his feints were slightly more realistic, he could fool Jiang Hai. However, just as he fooled Jiang Hai and was about to attack, Jiang Hai would instantly bounce back. Inertia, gravity, these things did not seem to exist in his body at all. As a top defensive player, Avery and Bradley had a very calm heart. This was also a necessary mentality for a defender. Even if the opponent shot 100 shots over his head, he would still defend with all his might. This kind of mentality would not cause any waves. However, when facing Jiang Hai, he found that he did not seem to have many ways to deal with him. Forcefully break through. Although there was no time limit in a 3v3, it was not the same thing to always wear out. In the end, he made the same decision as John. Forcefully break through. He stepped with his right foot and instantly retracted the ball to Jiang Hai's left side. Like a sharp knife, he cut in horizontally. Jiang Hai also leaned his body against his body at the first moment. When the two bodies touched, Bradley began to grit his teeth again. The strength was too strong. Not to mention the guard, even when facing the small forward, power forward, or even the center, he rarely felt such a strong suppression. This guy was just a beginner. How could a beginner be so fierce? But he still gritted his teeth tenaciously. He took 3 steps forward and rushed to the basket. He did not care if it went in or not, he would throw it out first. However, Jiang Hai would not even give him this kind of opportunity. The moment he threw the ball out, Jiang Hai also jumped up high. Just like how he grabbed John's ball, he directly grabbed the ball that was still floating in the air and threw it into the hands of his teammate who had been waiting outside for a long time. Just as his teammate was about to pass the ball back to Jiang Hai, Bradley had recovered and leaned in front of Jiang Hai. However, he did not notice that Jiang Hai pointed to the air at this time. When the black point guard saw Jiang Hai's action, he was stunned for a moment. But when he remembered Jiang Hai's jump, he still threw the ball into the air outside the backboard. At this time, Bradley felt a huge force coming from his back. Jiang Hai did not need to push him. He directly exploded with his legs. The original force of his body was enough to knock Bradley away. And at this time he rose into the air, grabbed the basketball that the black point guard sent over, and violently smashed it into the basket. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Please support Xiaofei, thank you. Chapter 95. Strong, so strong. He's really too strong. Seeing that Jiang Hai had once again ignored his close defense and directly jumped up to shoot, Avery and Bradley's heart was in turmoil. He was already thinking, if Jiang Hai was his teammate, who would be able to stop them in such a situation? Jiang Hai didn't know what he was thinking at this time. Jiang Hai only knew that he was having a lot of fun, and that was enough. His shooting was really too strong. He didn't even need to aim and find the star. It was like playing a game. Jiang Hai only needed to see the basket and press the D button, and the basketball would be shot out. Moreover, it was almost as if he was playing a game. His accuracy was so high that it made one's hair stand on end. As long as he raised his hand, Jiang Hai felt that he would hit the ball. He was that confident. In addition to these terrifying 3 points, Jiang Hai's violent dunk inside the 3-point line also made Avery and Bradley so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. How to defend? The opponent only needed to throw the ball into the air. With Jiang Hai's jumping ability, hovering ability, and that terrifying strength, the rearguard defense would be destroyed in an instant. Unless the inside 3-point line was there to block, whether it was inside or outside, it would probably become a paradise for the opponent to attack wantonly. If he could dribble the ball himself and attack by himself. Wow, thinking about it, Avery and Bradley felt that it was a little inconceivable. With such a mentality, the two unknowingly played for almost 15 minutes in the game. They weren't the only ones who were caught up in it. Even the spectators at the sidelines were caught up in it. In their eyes, this could be considered a NAB-level competition. This Manor Lord who appeared out of nowhere was really frighteningly strong. Just as they were about to continue, suddenly a dog barked at the edge of the court. Where did the big dog come from? Hearing the dog barking, Many people reacted and looked at the sidelines in surprise. At this time they saw a huge Caucasian dog standing on the sidelines, and a snow squirrel squatting on its head. Looking at Jiang Hai in the middle of the court, the big dog barked loudly. "Oh, I forgot about them." Hearing the big dog's barking, Jiang Hai, who was on the court, was stunned for a moment and slapped his forehead. He was having fun just now and forgot about Xiao Huang, Xiao Bai, and Bucktooth. Fortunately, these guys had a thick layer of fur, and Jiang Hai also lit a fire, so it didn't matter if they were frozen. It had been almost half an hour since Jiang Hai entered here. After all, there was no need to wait for half an hour to go to the toilet. In the end, Xiao Huang sent them to see what was going on while he continued to guard by the car. Squeak, 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 squeak. Seeing Jiang Hai's happy expression, Dai Feng was a little unhappy. He was having so much fun here, how could he let them freeze outside? How could he let them suffer from the cold outside? So he jumped on Xiao Bai's head and roared at Jiang Hai excitedly. What a cute squirrel, but... Seeing Bucktooth's appearance, many people's eyes lit up. Most people liked this little guy very much. If it wasn't standing on Xiao Bai's head at this time, and Xiao Bai was a deterrent to these people, they might have come over to touch this little guy. Sorry, I'm having fun. I'll leave now. Hearing the little guy's cry, although Jiang Hai didn't understand what he was saying because of the blood relationship, the telepathy still existed. Jiang Hai knew that they were unhappy, so he smiled awkwardly. After saying goodbye to the people around him, he ran back to the bench, took off his shoes and put on his coat. In less than a minute, he was fully armed. Then, before anyone could react, he quickly left with the dog and the squirrel. It wasn't until Jiang Hai left that these people reacted. They were all excitedly talking about Jiang Hai's game just now. From their point of view, the 3-on-3 match just now was much more interesting than the league match between the two high schools that was about to take place later. As for Avery and Bradley, he was also looking at Jiang Hai with a different light in his eyes. When he returned to the river, Jiang Hai saw a trace of contempt in Goldie's eyes. He couldn't help but smile even more awkwardly. Being despised by his own dog, he really had enough. Slightly embarrassed, Jiang Hai patted Goldie's head and packed up his things. Since he knew that he couldn't fish today, there was no need to fish anymore, so it was time to go back. After putting everything in the car, Jiang Hai returned to the car with the two dogs and the squirrel and returned to the manor. Seeing that Jiang Hai came back so early today and didn't catch a single fish, this made the people in the manor very curious. But no matter how curious they were, they couldn't say anything because they finally didn't have to eat fish. They weren't interested in being abused. After parking the car, Jiang Hai returned home and took a good shower. Although the game just now didn't last long, it was relatively intense. Avery and Bradley's defense didn't pose any threat to Jiang Hai, but for Jiang Hai, it was still a little troublesome. Because he was very close to Jiang Hai, every time he jumped, every time he exerted force, he needed to use all his strength. Jumping with all his strength for 15 minutes, even if he had almost unlimited physical strength, he would still feel a little tired. As for the sweat on his body, it was very normal. After washing off his sweat, Jiang Hai leaned against the side of his bed and sat on the carpet in his room. Then he turned on the projection television in front of him. At this time, the television was showing the sports channel, but there was no Celtics game today, so the sports channel here was broadcasting another game, the Knicks versus the Bulls. This game wasn't very interesting to watch. The Bulls were a strong team in the league and the Knicks were basically in the lottery zone. And most importantly, the Knicks star player, Cameron Anthony, was not in the team, although the Bulls were also missing Rose. But to put it bluntly, the Bulls had long been used to games without Rose, but the Knicks couldn't. Looking at the people on both sides of the court fighting hard for the ball, Jiang Hai couldn't help but recall the feeling of playing basketball just now. Can I also get a court to play basketball? Looking at it like this, my hands are really itching. Ever since he came to the United States, no, to be exact, ever since he got the True Dragon Soul, Jiang Hai hadn't played basketball again. This was because playing basketball was the same as playing football or playing other ball games. They all needed opponents. Although playing basketball could also be played alone and practice shooting, what was the point of playing basketball like that? It wasn't fun without competition. Playing basketball also required two people. Because of this, Jiang Hai hadn't played basketball since he came to the United States. But now, playing basketball made him addicted. He stopped watching the game and went downstairs to the gym. He remembered that he had bought a basketball here before. Sure enough, when he arrived at the gym, he found a basketball. This basketball was also a Spalding basketball, and it was the best type. It was brand new technology and it didn't need to be inflated. The air inside wouldn't escape, so it was convenient. Picking up the basketball, Jiang Hai unexpectedly found that he could unknowingly pick up a basketball with one hand. Although he used to play basketball, he could only pick up a light ball, a rubber ball, or a smaller basketball with one hand. A normal new ball was very smooth on the surface, so naturally, it wasn't easy to pick it up. But now, he could easily pick up the basketball in front of him, which really surprised him. However, when he dribbled the ball, he was exposed again. He could perfectly control his body, but he couldn't do much about the rebound basketball. Anyway, he had nothing to do now, so he took the basketball to the hall on the first floor. While turning on the TV, he kept dribbling the ball there. Only Jiang Hai, the two dogs, Dai Teeth and Chirp, lived in the whole villa. Obviously, Jiang Hai could ignore the protests of these four animals. Instead, it was convenient for him to practice dribbling here. As he dribbled the ball and adjusted his hand, he was also thinking about where to build a basketball court. Jiang Hai didn't lack landlords. He had plenty. With such a large grassland, where couldn't he get a basketball court? Not to mention an open-air one, even an indoor one was not a problem. How big was the TD North Shore Garden Arena, the home court of the Celtics? 70,000 square meters. For Jiang Hai, 70,000 square meters was just a small area. If he wanted to, he could build several. Of course, he wasn't going to waste his time. Now he was thinking about whether or not he should make a place to play. Because Boston's winter was really cold, it would be good to build an indoor place. As for an indoor basketball court, it shouldn't cost much. Of course, this was based on his current net worth. While Jiang Hai was thinking about whether to build a basketball court in the manor, Bradley returned to the city of Boston. But after returning to the city, he didn't rush home. Instead, he went to a villa in the suburbs. The owner of this villa was called Bradley Stevens. Perhaps everyone was unfamiliar with this name because before last year, he was the head coach of an NCAA-level university. However, after Doug Rivers was traded away by the Clippers like a player, he became the new coach of the Celtics. Today's update: today is New Year's Eve. Xiao Fei's wife is stuck on the highway and can't go home. Xiao Fei can only celebrate New Year's Eve by himself. Hey, I don't know if all of you are celebrating New Year's Eve by yourself? Yes, raise your hand in the book review section. Xiao Fei will give you some highlights. Oh he 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 he. Chapter 96. That day of the competition, it was as if nothing had happened. The days continued to pass and Jiang Hai continued to live a life of drunken stupor. Of course, this adjective was only forced upon him by Su Wei, Fu Yuan and the others. Jiang Hai was more willing to replace these four words with boring. Logically speaking, in his impression, rich people have a lot of entertainment such as bullying women, and so on. Important things have to be said 3 times, followed by less important things such as going out to show off, racing, gambling, drinking, or crossing the line and smoking something illegal. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of illegal things in the United States. First of all, Red Bull is illegal, and cough syrup can only be bought with a prescription from a hospital. Ordinary people can't buy it in a pharmacy. To Jiang Hai, a rich person's life should be racing, dragging a few girls in the car, drinking Red Bull and cough syrup, and going to Las Vegas for a few days. Well, other than drinking Red Bull and cough syrup, everything else is reasonable. But it's a pity that Jiang Hai's character will not allow him to do this. His daily routine was very simple. He would wake up, wash up, and if it was snowing he would go out to help shovel the snow. If it wasn't snowing he would stay at home and practice his martial arts. Then he would have lunch. His original activity was to go fishing by the river. However, ever since he failed to fish last time, his activity changed again. That was to build an indoor basketball court. Jiang Hai was really bored. He had nothing to do. Actually, when he was in Bing City he also had nothing to do during the winter. He would just stay at home and watch some anime and TV. The day would pass quickly. But he is not the only one who is bored. That's why his friends will come over to hang out with him every now and then. But after arriving in the US, it seems like he is the only idle person in the world. There are a lot of people in his mansion but they all have things to do. Occasionally they will have a day off but they prefer to stay at home. He does not have any friends of the same age as him. The only people who are of the same age as him are Belle and Harriman. But Harriman is unlikely to hang out with him. As for Belle, he was a crazy military enthusiast, a former soldier. As long as he took a break he would take out his collection of guns and take care of them. Some people said that taking care of guns was very normal. If you don't take care of them for a long time the guns would be broken. But the problem was that he had too many guns. There were more than 20 of them, rifles, submachine guns, pistols, shotguns. Almost all the guns that Jiang Hai knew of, there were even some antique guns. By the time he finished taking care of them, it would already be dark, so how could he go out to play? It is precisely because of this that Jiang Hai has been thinking that when he recruits again, that is, sailors and winemakers, he must not look for old men. He must look for a few young people. Otherwise he will be too bored. Fortunately he is a homebody. If he is alone he will go crazy. As for making friends in town, Jiang Hai expressed that he was not too interested. Jiang Hai was a person who was cold on the outside but passionate on the inside. He was the kind of person who would be happy if others took the initiative to talk to him and make friends with him. But if he had to take the initiative to make friends with others, then it would be difficult for him to do so. As for places like bars, to be honest, if no one takes him there, he will not go there in his life. But fortunately, his attention has been shifted to the construction of a basketball court. Since Jiang Hai had the idea of building a basketball court at home, he talked to Luo Binci the next day. For Jiang Hai's idea, Luo Binci said that there is no problem. If you want to build a basketball court, you don't have to wait until the beginning of spring to build it again. You can just change a warehouse. At most, you can just build a new warehouse. Jiang Hai's manor was originally built for 3 purposes: herding, fishing, and wine. And these 3 things, no matter which one it was, had a separate storage space. Wine naturally needed a cellar. Beef and fish need some cold storage. These cold storage can be turned into a basketball court with a little modification. After all, in Luo Binci's opinion, there is no need to build something too luxurious for his own fun. There is electricity, water, and heating here. It only needs a small modification, a shower, and then some wooden floors where the basketball court needs to be built. It is a little troublesome, but it is actually not troublesome. As for the basket, it is the simplest thing. It can be bought. A basket is not $200 or $300. It is also responsible for delivery and installation. Jiang Hai has 1 venue. It is really convenient to have 2. His own independent basketball court, Jiang Hai didn't care whether it was particularly beautiful or not. At least now there was a place for him to play basketball, and the lighting must be very bright. Since he has decided to build it, the following things are much simpler. Although Jiang Hai does not know how to do it, Luo Binci and the other cowboys are all little hands-on experts. During the break, they first helped Jiang Hai build the walls and separate rooms that should be smashed. Then they went to order a batch of large flooring. The flooring will be done by Jiang Hai himself. As for the ceiling lights and the transformation of the inner room, naturally Luo Binci and the others will help. Unknowingly, another 5 days passed in a hurry. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, his basketball court will be completed in 3 to 5 days. But today, although they are resting, they did not go to the basketball court to continue working. Because today is the legal holiday of the people of the United States, Christmas Eve. In the United States, Christmas is the same as the Spring Festival in China. It is a day for family reunion. As early as the 23rd, Jiang Hai had already given the employees a holiday. But in fact, the only one who really left the manor was Belle. There was no other way. The employees in Jiang Hai's manor didn't have anywhere to go. Harriman has no family, Burke Dollar and Edward Anderson are divorced, and their families are very estranged from them, so they are considered to have no family. Luo Binci never mentions his family, and it seems that they do not have much contact. After all, if he has a family, then when Jiang Hai comes here he will not be alone, but there will be a family waiting here. As for the Philmonts, they have no family above them, but they have children. Their children will come back to see them, so after Jiang Hai announced the holiday, only Belle went home for the holiday. Jiang Hai's holiday this time is not short, so he can wait until January 2nd to come back. As for the others, Jiang Hai directly announced that they will be divided into 2 groups. The Philmonts will naturally celebrate with their families, while Jiang Hai and the other bachelors will celebrate at Jiang Hai's manor tonight. As for tomorrow's Christmas, everyone will go to his villa together. Of course, these people can have fun, but when they leave they have to pack up. Early in the morning, the entire manor was very busy. Early in the morning, Luo Binci and the others went to Jiang Hai's forest with the Philmonts. Each of them cut down a pine tree which will be the Christmas tree. Mrs. Philmonts has already prepared the decorations for Christmas. Since no one has children in the manor, there is no need to prepare Christmas gifts. As for Jiang Hai, after waking up, he, Harriman, Burke Dollar and Edward Anderson prepare the food they will eat tonight. Compared to the full set of food prepared by Mrs. Philmonts, Jiang Hai and the others did not have such skills. Therefore they can only do what they are best at. For a while, although the residential area was in a mess, the festive atmosphere gradually made Jiang Hai feel a trace of warmth. Christmas Eve is a continuation of Christmas. According to legend, the origin of this holiday is because of Jesus that Westerners believe in. According to legend, Jesus was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of a virgin and the Virgin Mary. God sent a messenger, Gabriel, to tell Jesus in a dream that his father, well, his nominal father Joseph, should not abandon Mary because she was pregnant out of wedlock. Instead, he should marry her and name the child Jesus. God knows what Jesus, his nominal father, was thinking. Either way, he agreed, or maybe it was because he loved this woman too much. However, when Mary was about to give birth, the Roman government at that time made a mistake. They started a census and asked all the people to report their household registration when they arrived in Bethlehem. Joseph and Mary could only comply. God was too far away, and the Roman butcher's knife was closer to them. Therefore they arrived in Bethlehem. When they arrived, it was Christmas Eve. The two did not find a hotel to spend the night, so they spent the night in a stable. The first half of the night was Christmas Eve, and the second half of the night was Christmas Eve, when Jesus was born. Of course, different churches have different birthdays. The Catholic Church's birthday is today, while the Eastern Orthodox Church's birthday is January 7th. As the world's number one religion and number two religion, the American government obviously knew how to do things. The winter vacation period was from mid-December to mid-January. No matter which religion you believed in, you could have a holiday during this period. Jiang Hai is a standard atheist. Well, he should be. Anyway, even if he believes in God, he will not believe in this kind of foreign religion. In China, this foreign festival is also celebrated by many people, but basically this festival is not to celebrate Jesus' birthday, but to have sex and to confess. In other words, Christmas Eve is not peaceful at all. Of course, in the United States, it is more serious. In fact, Christmas Eve, and Carnival Night are different every night. Christmas Eve is celebrated with family members, and no one is allowed to go out and play with others. No one will visit on this day. Christmas Eve is celebrated with family and friends, and there are no outsiders. Carnival Night is actually a day to go out and play. In fact, Jiang Hai was not very clear about this in the past, and it was all taught by Robbins. Just as everyone was preparing for the festival in their room, a few car horns sounded. Today's second update is continuously delivered. Chidian.com welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Chidian Originals. Chapter 97. Beep Beep. Along with the sound of a car horn, Jiang Hai saw Philip in the distance quickly rushing out of the villa. He rode a small car and went to the entrance of the manor. Not long after, he drove an all-terrain vehicle, followed by a Toyota Camry, slowly drove in from the entrance of the manor. Seeing this, Jiang Hai, after all, was the owner of this place, so he temporarily put down his work and walked out with Robbins and the others. Let's stop here. He directed the car to stop in Jiang Hai's parking lot. If there were no ears, Philip's mouth would have cracked. Needless to say, the people sitting in the car must be his children. He hadn't seen them for a year. It was impossible to say that he didn't miss them, even if Philip was a chatterbox. Hearing Philemon's words, the car parked in the parking space on the other side. Then, four people got out of the car. 2 men and 2 women, all black. The black man who got out of the driver's seat was slightly older. In fact, it was difficult for Jiang Hai to judge the age of a black man unless he was really old. However, this guy had a beard, so he should be older. He was wearing a down jacket, which was 70% similar to Philip. When he smiled, his white teeth were exposed. The person who came down from the front passenger seat was also a man. He looked younger because he was dressed more youthful. He looked like the high school students in the United States that Jiang Hai had seen before, but he was slightly more mature than them. Needless to say, these 2 people should be Philip's eldest son and youngest son. After the back seat was opened, 2 women walked out. One of them looked older and had a scholarly aura. The other one looked like a student. Come, let me introduce you. This is Uncle Robbins, Uncle Burke, and Edward. This is Harriman Fells, your father's current colleague, and this is Jiang Hai, my current boss. Seeing the 4 people coming down with their respective luggage, Philip immediately took them to Jiang Hai's villa and introduced them one by one. In the United States, there was no separate name for an uncle. It was the same name as an uncle Antois. Therefore they had to call these 3 old men Antois. As for Harriman, he just nodded, but when he introduced Jiang Hai, they took the initiative to shake hands with him. After all, this was a person who worked for their father, and don't forget that they were still standing in Jiang Hai's territory. Boss, these are my 2 sons. My eldest son, Louis Turner, and this is his girlfriend, Javier Anthony, who is also a teacher in their school. This is my youngest son, John Turner, and this is his girlfriend, Fitz Shelley. While shaking hands, Philip also introduced his son and future daughter-in-law to Jiang Hai. Hello, you don't have to be so formal here. Your parents and I are like family, so you don't have to be so formal. Just treat this place as your own home. If possible, stay here for a few more days. Your parents haven't seen you for a while. After hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai also spoke to the two in a slightly strange but fluent English. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the few people here naturally nodded happily, because it was still winter vacation. The two of them worked and went to school, so compared to other jobs they had more time to rest. Originally they felt that if it was too troublesome, they would stay until January 2nd and leave after the new year, but it seemed that Jiang Hai was really hospitable, so they were willing to play in this big manor for a few more days. Especially John Turner's little girlfriend. After getting out of the car, she felt that her eyes were not enough. Obviously she was very curious about this manor. After a simple greeting, everyone went their separate ways. On Christmas Eve, people in the United States did not have the habit of visiting other people's homes, unless they were all single like Jiang Hai and the others. Philip's small villa naturally couldn't be compared to Jiang Hai's villa, but in the eyes of Louis and John Turner, it was still very good. Zhang Heng's eyes were fixed on Philip's small villa. Philip's small villa naturally couldn't be compared to Jiang Hai's villa. At least it was better than where they lived. Now, John Turner still lived in the school dormitory and Louis did not buy a house. Instead, he rented a suite in the city center not far from the school and lived there with his girlfriend. They would have to struggle for at least a few years before they could afford to live in such a small villa, whether they rented or bought it. Therefore, they still approved of this place. At least this villa was not like an ordinary worker's house. Whether it was the decoration or the layout, it felt very warm. It was more like a home than a temporary residence. In fact, according to the square meter, the rooms that Jiang Hai gave Philip and the others to live in were not smaller than those of the rich people in the suburbs. Regardless of whether the other party built these workers' houses because they were rich or for some other reason, the ones who benefited now were Jiang Hai and his employees. "Dad, your boss doesn't seem very old." After entering the room, they greeted Mrs. Philemon. The two girls then went into the kitchen to help. Of course, the most important thing was to show their sincerity. As for the man, he took off his coat and sat on the sofa in the living room. The moment he sat down, Louis Turner asked Mrs. Philemon out of curiosity. "Yeah, he's not very old. He's not even 30 years old. I think he's only 26 or 27 years old. He's a few years younger than you, Louis." Hearing his eldest son's words, Philip took out 3 bottles of beer from the fridge and said to him, "That's true. Then where did he get the money to buy such a large manor?" After taking the beer from Philip's hand, Louis asked curiously. It was impossible not to be curious. They were about the same age, so why was it that when he was only earning a few $1,000s a month, the other party already had a manor worth hundreds of millions? It was impossible to say that he felt completely balanced in his heart. "I'm not too sure, but he doesn't seem to be a Wuxia official or a descendant of a businessman. He once said that his parents passed away a year ago. It doesn't seem like he got the help of his parents." Philip shrugged and said with a smile after handing his youngest son a bottle of beer. Hearing his father's words, Louis frowned. He was a little concerned about Jiang Hai's unknown money and identity. Compared to other people, Louis believed that there was no such thing as love or hatred in this world. Now that Jiang Hai was really nice to his parents, Louis didn't believe that he was completely without a purpose. So now he was thinking about what Jiang Hai's purpose was. What was he going to do? How did he get his money? Did he get it through illegal means? Did he get it for free and so on? He had to admit that sometimes people were so outstanding. He had a kind of persecutory delusion. If others were too nice to him, he would feel wrong. If others didn't treat him well, that's what he should do? Don't worry about that, brother. This guy should be a good person. You have to believe in our parents' judgment. Knowing his brother's character, John Turner couldn't help but pat him on the shoulder. He drank beer and said with a smile, "I hope I'm overthinking it." Hearing his brother's words, Louis Turner laughed at himself. Sometimes it was not good to be too dark. It was because of his dark heart that he quit a lot of jobs. He would rather be an assistant coach of a high school basketball team than make more money, because he didn't have any sense of security. Of course you're overthinking it. Although I don't know where the boss's money comes from, I'm very sure that the boss is a good person, an out-and-out good person, and there is no problem with his identity. After all, they had even met the lawyer, so there was nothing for Philip to worry about. In his opinion, Jiang Hai was just like his nephew and he was trustworthy. Patting his eldest son on the shoulder, Philip made a conclusion. Then he called his 2 sons to decorate the Christmas tree together. As for Jiang Hai's villa, Jiang Hai didn't know that Philip's eldest son was doubting his purpose. In fact, Jiang Hai also felt that his purpose was a bit impure, because he didn't know what he was going to do. However, compared to his goal, their arrangement was much faster. After all, they were a group of old men, and they were not that particular when it came to doing things. Their speed of decorating was not slow. The Christmas tree had been set up a long time ago, and there were all kinds of trinkets and lights hanging on it. It looked very festive. As for the food, everyone was almost done preparing. The roast turkey that Jiang Hai bought the other day was especially big, and he planned to eat it tomorrow. Today they were eating the one they hunted in the forest that day. In addition to the roast turkey, the rest were ordinary dishes such as roast beef, roast lamb chops, roast fish, roast shrimp, and the eternal cheddar soup as well as some corn porridge. After all, Christmas Eve was just an extension of Christmas, so today's meal wasn't particularly sumptuous. She had to wait until tomorrow to eat a particularly sumptuous meal. Even so, she had already cooked a lot today. Compared to the Philip family, Jiang Hai's family was much worse. After all, no one here was religious. After the food was ready, they started eating at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. During this time, Philip came over and brought the gingerbread man made by his wife, which was actually a biscuit. Of course, he couldn't avoid being forced to drink a glass of it. Several big men eating and drinking, naturally they were quite noisy. Unknowingly, the meal lasted until 10 o'clock in the evening. Everyone dispersed, but before they dispersed, they had to tidy up Jiang Hai's house. This was what they had agreed on. Happy New Year, Happy New Year, I wish you all a Happy New Year, we collect, we recommend, let's all have a Happy New Year together. Chapter 98. Hiss, I drank a little too much. The next morning, Jiang Hai woke up in a daze as he tried to urinate. He opened his eyes weakly. Last night he couldn't remember how much wine he had drunk. Of course he didn't drink too much, nor did he drink too much. But when he woke up this morning, his head still hurt a little. After going to the toilet, Jiang Hai glanced at his mobile phone. It was already past 9 o'clock. He didn't sleep anymore. To be honest, he couldn't sleep anymore. He just lay on the big bed and looked at the ceiling in front of him. Suddenly, Jiang Hai felt that he was really a little bored. This is a big festival. There is no one around me. What is this called? He sat up helplessly. When other people are rich, they have a group of wives and concubines. I have been rich for half a year. Although it hasn't been half a year, it has been less than half a year. But I am still alone. I haven't even called a service that costs money. It seems that I am really a good man. Speaking of which, I feel ashamed of myself. Let's not talk about it. It will be tears if we talk too much. Helplessly shaking his head, Jiang Hai sighed. I'm really a jinx. I have money, but I don't have a woman. How ugly am I? Of course, although Jiang Hai was definitely not handsome, he wasn't ugly either. He was 188 meters tall and had single eyelids, but his eyes weren't small. He used to be short-sighted, but ever since he obtained the true dragon's soul, his condition had improved. His body used to be a bit fat, but ever since he obtained the true dragon's soul, his body had become almost perfect. His muscles were not particularly swollen, but they were definitely not bad. His muscles didn't look like the traditional streamlined muscles of the Orientals. His muscles were somewhere between the Orientals and the Westerners. At first glance, one could tell that they were well developed, but they didn't feel heavy. Logically speaking, Jiang Hai, who is young and rich, looks good and has a good height, should be the favorite of those beautiful women. But what makes Jiang Hai a little depressed is that it seems that he doesn't receive much attention. Of course, this is also related to him being a homebody. Since he is not going to sleep, Jiang Hai jumped out of bed, washed up, and prepared to go downstairs. When he went to the first floor, he found that Burke Dollar was already there. He was cleaning up the turkey. Turkey was similar to Wuxia's roast chicken, but it was much bigger and more troublesome than roast chicken. Yesterday, Jiang Hai heard them talk about the specific method. It is really troublesome. It seems that it is not Burke's first time doing this, and he is very familiar with it. Jiang Hai looked at the plate next to him. There are a lot of things on it: carrots, parsley, onions, chestnuts, butter, and so on. This turkey is bought by Jiang Hai last time. It weighs 23 pounds, which is really not small. The most important part of roasting a turkey is not the roasting but the thawing method. Therefore, Burke Dollar had already cleaned up the turkey yesterday. First, he took it out and thawed it in a place of 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. After thawing, he washed the turkey, hollowed out its neck and internal organs, soaked it in 2 gallons of water and 2 cups of salt, and put it in a cool place for more than 4 hours. Then he took the turkey out of the salt water, rinsed it under running water, wiped it dry with a paper towel, and put it in a cool place for 8 hours before it can be used. Therefore, making a turkey is really troublesome and thankless. This morning, Burke Dollar came over and preheated the oven. Then he mixed the things he prepared with the butter and put it into the turkey's stomach. Then he tied the turkey's legs with a rope and fixed the turkey's wings. Then he took out some lettuce and other vegetables and put them on the prepared baking tray. He added a cup of water and made a V-shaped rack. The turkey's whole body was smeared with butter. In order to prevent it from being burnt, he wrapped it in foil. Then he put the turkey breast down and roasted it in the oven for 45 minutes. Then he took out the baking tray and smeared the juices on the turkey's whole body. Then he put the turkey side up, added half a cup of water and put it in the oven for 15 minutes. Then he took it out and smeared the juice all over it. Then he turned it 180 degrees and put it in the oven from the other side for 15 minutes. Then he took it out again and smeared the juice all over the turkey. Then, he let the turkey breast face up and continued to roast it for 30 to 45 minutes. This depended on his preference. If he liked to eat burnt ones he would roast them longer. If he liked to eat tender ones he would roast them shorter. If he wanted to know if the turkey was cooked, he had to use a thermometer. If the chicken breast was cooked, it should be 74 degrees Celsius. If the chicken leg was cooked, it should be over 77 degrees Celsius. Then the turkey was done. When eating he could choose to eat it directly or cut it into slices and mix it with other things. In the United States, someone had already made a sauce that was best suited for roasted turkeys. It was made with sweet sauce, sesame oil, peanut butter, Thai sweet sauce and cherry sauce. Tasted pretty good. A few days ago Mrs. Philemon had already made the roasted turkey sauce. She kept some for herself and gave the rest to Jiang Hai. "Hey Uncle Burke, are you alone? Where are the others?" After opening the door and letting the two dogs go to the toilet, Jiang Hai went to the kitchen and asked Burke Dollar. They went to the cowshed first. The cowshed needs to be fed today. Philemon took his two sons to inspect the manor. As for Mrs. Philemon and the others, they are preparing other food at home. You know, there's a lot of food tonight, but this is the only thing I know how to make. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Burke Dollar smiled at Jiang Hai and shrugged casually. Although it was Christmas, the people were on holiday but the cows were not. They couldn't starve for 3 days. "Oh, I see. Is there anything I can help you with?" Hearing Burke Dollar's words, Jiang Hai chuckled. It was really good for Jiang Hai to find these hardworking subordinates. "Cut the beef. We'll roast it later," Burke Dollar said with a smile after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai nodded, then went into the kitchen and began to help. As the saying goes, those who rely on the mountain live off the mountain and those who rely on the river live off the water. Jiang Hai had a fishing ground and a ranch, so naturally he mainly ate beef and seafood. Of course, in addition to beef, fish, shrimp and crabs, there was also a main dish today, lobster. Jiang Hai had been dreaming of this main dish for so long, but unfortunately this lobster was not caught by him. He bought it from Winthrop. In China, lobster had always been synonymous with nouveau riche, luxury goods. Of course, the nouveau riche mainly ate lobster because the lobster in China was really small. Although it tasted good, at least in terms of sales, it could not be compared with the lobsters in the United States and Australia. In fact, a long time ago the people in the United States and Australia almost never ate lobster because they thought it was not delicious. Not to mention that it was troublesome and there was not much meat. In short, it was not a delicious thing. Therefore, lobster was basically a food for the poor. The price of lobster and abalone in these two places had never been high. It was not until Wuxia reappeared in front of the world that people all over the world suddenly realized that the Chinese were very rich and loved to eat lobster. In just a few years, the price of lobster in Australia had skyrocketed from a few Australian dollars per pound to more than 30 Australian dollars, which was equivalent to more than 100 renminbi for 9 taels of silver. This was actually not too expensive in China. Which restaurant would charge you more than 1,000 renminbi for a 2-catty lobster? But this was already considered a sky-high price in Australia. The price was outrageous. The fishing companies in Australia, including transportation, fuel and customs taxes, sold the lobster to Wuxia at more than twice the price they sold it locally. No matter how stupid they were, they knew where to sell it. As for the United States, the most famous lobster was naturally the Maine lobster, which was the legendary Boston lobster. However, the main production area of the Boston lobster was Maine. Because of the suppression of local policies and the fact that it was on the East Coast, there were 2 ways to send it to Wuxia. One was through the Atlantic Ocean and then through the Indian Ocean. Only then would it reach Wuxia. However, everyone knew that to take this route, one had to pass through Africa and Somalia. Taking this route was really too dangerous. Although the profits were high, one had to be alive to spend it. The second route was to cross the United States, send it from the West Coast, and then send it from the Pacific Ocean to Wuxia. This was too troublesome. The transportation cost by land was much higher than by water. Most importantly, the people in Wuxia were not willing to eat dead and frozen things. If the lobster was to be kept alive, they might have to take a plane. With this kind of transportation cost, there was actually not much money to be made. It was precisely because of this that although the lobster from Maine was still sold to Wuxia, there were not many of them. It was precisely because of this that the local price of the lobster was not too high. It was also because of this that the local price of the lobster was not too high. It was sold in the local seafood market in Winthrop. Different sizes had different prices. Generally speaking, a lobster that was about 20 centimeters long and weighed half a kilogram would be $12 to $30 a pound. If it was 30 centimeters long, it would be $30 a pound. If it was 40 centimeters long, it would be $80 a pound. If it was half a meter long, it would be $300 a pound. After all, this type of lobster was not only meat but also a kind of symbol. The lobsters that Jiang Hai bought were naturally not too big. He bought 10 lobsters that were about 30 centimeters long. One lobster was about $50. He bought 20 lobsters in total and was just waiting to eat them today. Just as Jiang Hai was almost done with the beef, the others came back. Then Jiang Hai's villa became lively, especially after Philip brought his 2 sons. The eldest son, Louis, was a little better. He just looked around, then sat there and chatted. Occasionally he would help the uncles get some beer and such. As for his youngest son, John, his eyes were shining. After all, he had not officially stepped into society yet. He looked at everything with envy. Jiang Hai's 2 big dogs, Jiang Hai's latest game console, 3D projection TV. Ever since he came to Jiang Hai's house, he found that his eyes were not enough to take in everything. This was the place where the top otaku lived. Today's second update delivered on time. Chidian Chinese website www.chidian.com welcomes readers to read the latest, fastest and hottest serialized works on Chidian Originals. Chapter 99. What? Are you interested? Sit here and play with me. At this time, Jiang Hai, who had just finished cutting the beef, walked over. After all, he was the boss, so he didn't need to do the rest of the work. Looking at John's sparkling eyes, Jiang Hai smiled and patted him on the shoulder. He pointed at the game console next to Jiang Hai's TV and said to him with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John couldn't help but nod immediately. Looking at him, Jiang Hai also wanted to play. They moved 2 small sofas to the TV and started playing. They were playing the NBA 2K series that had just come out this year. This was the first time Jiang Hai played against others since he bought this game console. In the past, he always played MC mode. It couldn't be helped. Other than him, there was only the old man in the manor. Harriman also couldn't play with him. Bell only knew how to study guns. He didn't like games. If it was Call of Duty, he might be interested. But when Jiang Hai played that kind of game, he would faint. It was quite a helpless matter. However, compared to Jiang Hai, John obviously played a lot. Although his hardware wasn't as good as Jiang Hai's, his skills were much better than Jiang Hai's. Obviously, Jiang Hai's reaction and physical fitness weren't outstanding in the game. Not long after, the 2 of them played half of the game. John used a weak 76ers team, but they defeated Jiang Hai's Warriors team with a score of 72 to 46. If nothing unexpected happened, this would be a bloodbath. Looking at the score on the field, Jiang Hai smiled a little awkwardly. Originally, he always thought that he was a master, but he didn't think that he would be beaten so miserably. However, although it was a little awkward, he didn't care. If John threw the game, he would be angry. His skill was inferior to others, so there was nothing to say. Moreover, in his opinion, this was just a game. Guys, come and help me. However, just as Jiang Hai was about to continue, he unexpectedly discovered that his savior had arrived. At this time, the door of the villa was opened. Then Mrs. Philip and John's 2 girlfriends came in with a lot of things. Jiang Hai glanced at them and saw that they were all desserts. He didn't have time to play and took the initiative to help. The Americans attached great importance to Christmas, so naturally they would eat a lot. At Christmas there were 4 essential foods. The most important one was the turkey. The turkey of the Americans was like the dumplings of the Wuxia people. Of course, this was the northern part of the country. No matter if it was the New Year or any other holiday, they would always cook it. It was the same in the United States. Turkey was the best choice when there was nothing to eat during the New Year and other festivals. In addition to the turkey, there were 3 other things that were indispensable: roast suckling pig, Christmas pudding, and corn porridge. As for the roast suckling pig, Jiang Hai only bought a small one this year because he didn't eat pig skin. Jiang Hai didn't really want to eat it. As for the corn porridge, he had already eaten it last night, but he had to eat it again today. As for the Christmas pudding that Mrs. Phillip brought over, there were many other things to eat. The Christmas pudding was also the dessert after the main meal. It was usually made with plums, pudding, minced meat, and so on. Of course, this was only the most basic thing. For Jiang Hai's house, it was natural to make it the most sumptuous. Therefore, in the Christmas pudding made by Mrs. Phillip, there were apples, walnuts, raisins, soft candies, cherries, lemons, carrots, oranges, pears, and so on. It was very rich. In addition to the pudding, there were many other things to eat, such as cookies, pumpkin cakes, fruit cakes, almond cakes, apple pies, strawberry pies, and tree trunk cakes. This was also a representative food of good luck in the coming year. After Mrs. Phillip and the others arrived, everyone continued to prepare noisily. However, the original core of the preparation had changed from Burke Dollar and Robbins to Mrs. Phillip. The level of these two big bosses was only at the level of being assistants. But now there were two future daughters-in-law, so they didn't need to blindly command them. Perhaps they also felt the festive atmosphere, as Jiang Hai's 4 pets were also very happy at this time. Xiao Bai had been running around in the crowd. Xiao Huang was usually a little cold, but today he also squatted at Jiang Hai's feet and looked at the people in the house curiously. As for Dai Teeth and Chirp, they would fight whenever they had time. Chirp's current appearance was not much different from when he was first picked up. He was still gray and dirty. However, he was much stronger than before. In the past, he was the one who was beaten up most of the time when he fought with Dai Teeth. Now he could occasionally fight back. After a lively preparation, the sky turned dark in the blink of an eye, and the dinner officially began. As everyone raised their glasses in front of them, this year's Christmas dinner officially began. "Hey brother, your place is great." After 30 dishes and 5 flavors of wine, Louis and John, who were still a little reserved, gradually relaxed, especially John, who played a few games with Jiang Hai in the afternoon. He directly hugged Jiang Hai's neck and shouted at him loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. "Of course, this is paradise, paradise." Hearing John's words, Jiang Hai also laughed loudly. Looking at Jiang Hai hugging his brother's neck and waist, Louis, who still did not understand Jiang Hai's purpose, took a sip of beer. He was not familiar with Jiang Hai, but after a day of understanding he found that this Jiang Hai really did not seem to have any special purpose. At that time he could go there to watch the game every few days and he would not have to stay at home all day long. Woof 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 woof. Just as Jiang Hai was there, listening to John Turner's endless words while clearing the snow on the ground, suddenly there was a barking sound. Jiang Hai looked in the direction of Xiao Bai's barking. He found a car parked in front of Jiang Hai's gate. Jiang Hai did not recognize the car. He had never seen it before. So after talking to Luo Binsi next to him, he temporarily threw the things in the car and walked to the gate. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, the person in the car also saw his figure and jumped out of the car immediately. "Hi, it's really cold. I'm sorry, I rashly came to visit without calling. I have no choice. I asked John and he didn't know your contact information, so I could only come here directly. I hope I didn't disturb you." Just like what Winthrop's Mayor Wallace Kirk said, the Americans hate visiting without making a phone call. Therefore, the person who jumped out of the car in front of Jiang Hai was a bit reserved. He smiled at Jiang Hai and said, "Thank you for coming. Oh, fortunately I'm still here. What can I do for you?" Looking at the man in front of him, Jiang Hai frowned. "This man." Speaking of which, Jiang Hai also had some impression of him. Avery and Bradley, who played with him. Today's update is only this chapter. There is still some left, but the editor said that the pace needs to be slowed down. Next week, Sanjiang is very likely to be on the shelves next week. So, to everyone, I'm sorry, I'll release less today and tomorrow. From Monday to Friday, I'll update more often, twice a day. Chapter 100. What do you want to drink? Standing in front of his fridge, Jiang Hai opened the fridge door, looked at the drinks inside, and asked Avery and Bradley, who was sitting on the sofa behind him. "If there is juice, if there is no juice, milk or plain water is fine." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Avery and Bradley said with a serious face. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai looked in the fridge. Recently, Jiang Hai has become used to drinking. Whether it is beer or foreign wine, Jiang Hai likes to drink more and more. Suddenly, he is looking forward to the taste of the wine produced by the grapes transformed by his blood. However, although the land at his winery has been transformed, it is not so easy to make wine. Jiang Hai doesn't know much about this, so he will hire a winemaker around the beginning of spring next year. However, although Jiang Hai likes to drink recently, he still likes to drink beverages when he first came, so there is a lot of juice in the fridge. He took out a bottle of orange juice and threw it to Bradley, Then Jiang Hai took out a can of Coke. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't like to drink this thing because after drinking it, he would feel uncomfortable in his teeth. But since he came to the United States, he has been drinking it a lot and he really likes the taste. What's the matter, say it? After opening the can of Coke and taking a sip, Jiang Hai sat in front of Bradley and asked him. The Americans like to get straight to the point, and Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person whose edges and corners had been ground down by society. He also preferred to do things straightforwardly. It wasn't his style to always drag things out. It's like this: have you ever thought about playing a professional game of basketball? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bradley, who was still thinking about how to cut to the chase, put down the juice in his hand and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face and said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then he looked at his eyes and found that his eyes seemed to be serious. This caught Jiang Hai a little off guard. What is this situation? Play a game? Professional? Sorry, I don't have such plans. If it was a few months ago when Jiang Hai just got the true dragon spirit and someone invited him to play a professional game, he would probably happily agree. After all, playing a professional game, especially in the NBA, has a pretty good income. He can earn at least hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. After deducting taxes, he can still have hundreds of thousands of dollars left. When he has never seen money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, the attraction is not ordinary. He would probably wake up laughing at night. But now, what is the point of playing basketball? For Jiang Hai, he does not have a strong desire to win, and basketball is not his life. He is just an ordinary basketball enthusiast, so in his view, playing basketball is to make money. But does he lack money? As long as he manages his manner well, the money he earns in a year is more than what a top NBA star earns in a lifetime. So when he heard Bradley say that he wants to play a game, he did not care too much. Not interested. Jiang Hai curled his lips and said lightly. I played with you before, so I know how much potential you have. As long as you want, you can even become a top NBA superstar. You can earn tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars a year. You can feel the cheers of the crowd and become a public figure. Don't you want that? Looking at Jiang Hai, Bradley already knew that it would not be easy to convince Jiang Hai. But considering Jiang Hai's talent and strength, he had to calm down and continue to speak to Jiang Hai with a serious face. Well, let's put it this way. First, I don't have a crazy love for playing basketball. I am just an ordinary basketball enthusiast, so I don't have many thoughts about becoming a superstar. Second, an annual income of tens of millions or hundreds of millions is something that can only be achieved after many years of hard work. It's not like I don't watch the NBA. Besides, do you really think that I am short of money? Third, I am a homebody. I don't like the media too much in my life, so I don't like the status of a superstar. So, are you satisfied? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bradley could not help but be speechless. Jiang Hai is 27 years old this year. He is no longer a hot-blooded hothead. Compared to receiving the cheers of tens of thousands of people, he prefers to stay at home, watch TV and play on the computer. This is also good. Of course, this is under the condition that he is absolutely not short of money. Seeing Jiang Hai's stubborn side, Bradley really did not know what to say this time. Then, have you done a complete physical test? Have you ever thought about how strong you are? After thinking about it, Bradley felt that if he wanted to persuade Jiang Hai with his own mouth, it would be impossible, so he was going to do it in a roundabout way. Since he can't do it, then he will let others have a headache. I really haven't done this. Hearing Bradley's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then said slowly. Since he had the true dragon soul essence, he just felt that his body should be the limit of human beings, but so far he has not done a real test to test how strong he is, how fast he is, and how high he can jump. Now Bradley bluntly changed the topic to this, which made Jiang Hai a little concerned. Do you want to try it? Looking at Jiang Hai, Bradley said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. It seems that he has nothing to do in the afternoon, so he will go and have a look. After seeing Jiang Hai nod, Bradley's sad face finally smiled. Then he did not delay and stood up directly and left with Jiang Hai. The two drove one after the other and left the manor. Of course, before leaving, Jiang Hai also had to talk to Robbins and the others. After hearing that Jiang Hai went to the Celtics for training, Lewis Turner and John Turner were also very interested. Lewis Turner was now an assistant coach of the basketball team at Lawrenceville High School in New York. Naturally, he was very interested in basketball. As for John Turner, although his favorite sport was football, it did not prevent him from liking basketball as well. Going to an NBA team's training arena is very tempting for a college student like him. He felt a little excited when he thought about how he could brag about himself when he returned to school. Seeing their expressions, Jiang Hai also chuckled and then brought them along. Although they have only known each other for a day, for Jiang Hai, it is rare to see friends of the same age in the manner. It is natural for him to bring them for a visit. Bradley did not say anything about it because he does not care about people visiting. In fact, every day except for the closed training, there are always many people going in and out of the Celtics training arena. Some are staff here, some are reporters, some are the team's executives, of course some are the players' friends and family, and some are die-hard fans. The black players, especially those who are not from good backgrounds, have a lot of family members. Although Avery and Bradley is not a player from a bad background, he is also a black man. He has long been used to seeing relatives and friends visiting. When he first went for a trial, there were many more people than this, so he did not say much. He left the manor with Jiang Hai and the others and went to the Celtics training center. 4 NBA teams, the stadiums were used for their games. During normal training and the team's high-level office, they naturally had their own exclusive training stadiums. Now they were at the training stadium, a basketball stadium in the suburbs of Boston. However, the security here is stricter than in the competition arena. Even Jiang Hai's car needs to be checked again. After parking the car in the underground parking lot, Bradley took Jiang Hai and the Turner brothers to the elevator and went to the physical test center on the second floor. At this time, there are already people waiting in the physical test center. Jiang Hai glanced at the people standing there. There are a total of 3 people, 2 white people and 1 yellow person. Among the 2 white people, the older one is estimated to be in his 50s. He has short brown hair and deep wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. There is another white person who is talking to him at this time. He does not look very old, only in his 30s. Next to them, there is a yellow person who is average in height but very muscular. When they saw Jiang Hai and the others coming over, the 3 people stopped talking and turned to look at Jiang Hai and the others. "Mr. Chairman, boss, Mr. Bree, this is the person I told you about, Mr. Jiang Hai." Looking at the 3 people in front of him, Avery and Bradley spoke first. Hearing his words, the 3 people also came over. "Hello, my name is Danny Ainge. I am the current head coach of the Celtics. I hope I can see you in the office in a while." Danny Ainge shook hands with Jiang Hai and said with a smile. After Jiang Hai smiled and nodded, he left first. After he left, the middle-aged white man came over. "Hello, my name is Brad Stevens. I am the current head coach of the Celtics. Now Mr. Bree will help you with the physical test. I will see you later." After shaking hands with Jiang Hai and briefly introducing himself, he also left. Then the yellow person came up with a smile and took Jiang Hai into the equipment room. Chapter 101. In basketball, the body was very important, but it was not everything. Otherwise, there would be almost no Caucasians and Asians. Just let those black muscles play on the court. Basketball also had rules. The accuracy of the shot, the reaction on the court, the vision, the tactics, the positioning, and so on were all very important. On the streets of the United States, there were many people with excellent physical fitness, but there were only a few who could enter the NBA. However, even though the body was not everything in basketball, it was the foundation of all basketball. A person who had perfect shooting skills but was made of glass would not be able to survive in the NBA. The physical test, as a person's positive data, was naturally the most important. The person who did the physical test for Jiang Hai was called Brian Bo. He could be considered half of Jiang Hai's hometown because he was also Chinese. However, he was an ABC. He only knew a little Chinese, but his English was very fluent. This made Jiang Hai feel a little out of place. It was not a happy thing to have to speak English with a guy who looked like someone he was familiar with. But no matter what, seeing that he was doing well in the NBA made him quite happy. After entering the equipment room, the first thing they did was a basic physical test, which was commonly known as a hardware test. Height, arm span, weight, etc. When measuring his height, Jiang Hai was a little surprised that he had grown taller. Height 189 centimeters, weight? Oh, who the F asterisk CK, you are not fat. Why are you so heavy? 240 pounds. Brian Bo looked at the number displayed in front of him and could not help but cry out in surprise. When he heard his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, but then he nodded. He knew from the beginning that he would be very heavy. This was a matter of muscle density. Thinking about the Captain America in the Marvel world, he was 188 meters tall and weighed 240 pounds. His physical fitness could almost be regarded as the limit of human beings. Jiang Hai did not know who was stronger between him and the Captain America. After all, he had not traveled through time, but he was very sure that the Captain America's muscle density was very high. Your muscle density may even be able to block a bullet, Brian Bo said with envy as he pinched Jiang Hai's steel-like arm. As an assistant strength coach, they were actually the fitness coaches of the Celtics. They dreamed of having a body like Jiang Hai's. Jiang Hai just smiled. Then Jiang Hai measured other data. The arm span was 197 centimeters. Although it was longer than the average person, it was not particularly long. It was still within the normal range. Thinking about Jiang Hai's Avery and Bradley, who was 1.88 meters tall but had a 2.02 meter arm span. Jiang Hai's arms were not too long. The leg length was 107 centimeters. Although it was not very long, it was not too bad. At least it was not the 1-to-1 type. He stood at a height of 2.46 meters. Next was the sports department's physical test. First he jumped. When Brian Bowe prepared the equipment, Jiang Hai suddenly jumped up. Except for Avery and Bradley, who had already seen Jiang Hai jump, Brian Bowe, Lewis Turner, and John Turner, who came with Jiang Hai, all opened their mouths in surprise. Especially John Turner, the words that Philemon often used were already spewing out of his mouth. Who the F***ck? F***ck. What the F***ck? What the F***ck? Man, are you flying? Are you sure you're not flying? How did you jump so high? When Jiang Hai landed, John Turner could not help but yell at him. What the F***ck? Is there something wrong with the equipment? Looking at the data on the equipment, Brian Bowe also cursed. 152 centimeters? What the F***ck? There's nothing wrong with your equipment. He really has such strength. Looking at the number in front of him, Avery and Bradley also cursed. He had already guessed that Jiang Hai's jump was amazing, but he did not expect it to be this amazing. At present, there was no special century record in the world for a standing high jump. But when it came to jumping, the first thing that came to mind was an NBA player. Among the NBA players, the one with the best jumping ability was probably Little Potato Weber, followed by Francis, AI, and Nate Robinson. These short dunkers were all on the list, and their standing jumps were only about 1.2 meters, and that was when they were in a state of insanity. Demigod Vince Carter's jump was about 1 meters. Legend had it that Jordan's best jump was about the same as Carter's. However, the one with the best jumping ability was Earl McCormick. His name might be unfamiliar to everyone, but his nickname was probably familiar to many people. The GOAT, a super legend on the streets. Legend had it that he had once picked up coins and 20-cent bills from the edge of a backboard. He was only 1.88 meters tall, so it could be inferred that his jumping ability was about 1.5 to 1.55 meters. Jiang Hai's body was the limit of a human's body. Therefore he could definitely jump higher than the GOAT. If that was the case, their jaws would drop. Then they would be so shocked that they would vomit blood. The 100-meter sprint, 9.61 seconds, was only 0.3 seconds away from the world record of 9.58 seconds. However, this was also because Jiang Hai was not used to the start. His reaction time at the start was slower. If he practiced for a while, it would not be too difficult for him to break the world record. The next series of speed tests were even more dazzling. The three-quarter sprint was 2.93 seconds, and the back and forth was 9.72 seconds. After everyone's jaws dropped, Jiang Hai began to prepare for another extremely important test, the bench press. At first, Brian Bowe lifted 120 kilograms, but Jiang Hai did it. Although it was a little heavy, he did not feel anything. After 10 consecutive lifts, he asked for more weights. Then it was increased to 180 kilograms, but it was still very easy. Damn it. Do you know how many people in the alliance can push 180 kilograms? Looking at Jiang Hai's relaxed appearance, Brian Bowe began to mutter again. He still had one more thing to say. The difficult ones to move were all centers. I don't know, but I think it's still too light. Add another 50 kilograms. Jiang Hai casually put the barbell back on the bench press and moved his wrists. Then he spoke to Brian Bowe. 50 kilograms? That's too risky. You know, the best players in the NBA can only bench press about 200 kilograms. Why don't you try 200 kilograms first? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Brian Bowe did not say anything. Over there, Lewis Turner spoke up. As an assistant coach of a high school basketball team, he obviously knew a lot. But he did not think that Jiang Hai's strength was so terrifying. Okay. Hearing him say that, Jiang Hai did not know where his limit was. It was always good to be careful. However, after adding 200 kilograms, Jiang Hai still felt very light. He felt that nearly 1/3 of his strength had not been released. 200 kilograms was still far from enough. No, it's too light. Add another 50 kilograms. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai said to Brian Bowe. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the four people here looked at each other. Their eyes were full of disbelief. Although when they tested Jiang Hai's weight and found that his muscle density was so high, everyone had a vague feeling that Jiang Hai's strength was not small. But when he really showed his strength, they were shocked. 250 kilograms? For Jiang Hai, it only took him a little more effort. After 10 times, he put it back to its original position. He looked at Brian Bo again. This time, Brian Bo didn't say anything and just directly increased the weight. But this time, he didn't add more than 10 kilograms. From 250 kilograms to 300 kilograms, Jiang Hai felt some pressure. When it reached 320 kilograms, Jiang Hai felt that the strength in his hands had almost reached the limit. At present, in the world, without any assistance equipment, the world record was 722 pounds, which was 327 kilograms. Jiang Hai could lift 320 kilograms without any training. This was enough to scare these guys out of their wits. On top of the barbell, there was a black mass of weight on both sides. Just looking at it made people shudder. The barbell was almost bent, but Jiang Hai could still lift it steadily. Bang! After Jiang Hai did 5 more bench presses, he put the barbell back in its original position. For the first time, he felt that his arms were a little sore. It seemed that 320 kilograms was his limit. That's too much of a beast. Big brother, you are my big brother. Can you teach me how to be so forceful? Seeing Jiang Hai put down the barbell, 3 of the 4 people next to him were silent. Only John Turner came over and asked with envy. This can't be taught. I'm born with it. Ask your dad. I don't train in the manner. Jiang Hai shrugged helplessly and said to John Turner. Indeed, he sometimes practiced boxing and ran in the manner. He really didn't show off. But for the 3 people next to him, Jiang Hai's physical test was so terrifying that it made them a little numb. This monster. Looking at the table on the computer, Brian Bo whispered. He even suspected that Jiang Hai was an alien in human skin. If not, how could his body be so strong? No matter what he thought, after the physical test, Jiang Hai had already followed Bradley to the training ground downstairs. Because there was a home game tonight, even though it was carnival night, the team still didn't have a holiday. Chapter 102. Ever since Rondo left, actually before Rondo left, the Celtics' record wasn't very good either. After Rondo left, the Celtics' record seemed to have gotten worse. Other than their home win against the Timberwolves, they had already suffered 2 consecutive defeats. They lost to the Heat and the Magic, who also had a poor record. The Celtics were no longer a strong team in the league, so the Christmas war that everyone was looking forward to had nothing to do with them. However, it was still one of the faces of the NBA, so a game was arranged to be held on the night of the carnival. That night, they would be playing against the Brooklyn Nets. Although the Nets were bad now, they were much better than the Celtics on paper. If it was a normal team without a top player, they would have to think of a way to suck or make a trade. However, the Celtics didn't have such a tradition. Even if they were to lose to death, they would never play badly. Therefore, the team still had the energy to fight for victory. Skill level was skill level and ambition was ambition. It wasn't their style to admit defeat before the game started. When Jiang Hai arrived at the training ground, he was surprised to find that although the record wasn't good, the team's atmosphere was good. At this time, the team's players were gathered in groups of 3 to 5 on the large training ground. Some were practicing shooting, some were practicing inside the 3-point line, some were practicing hitting, grabbing rebounds, blocking positions, and the like. The NBA training ground wasn't a small place with only 1 basketball court. When Jiang Hai arrived, he saw that there were 10 basketball racks, which meant that there were 5 basketball courts. There was a lot of empty space next to each basketball court. There were many boys standing next to the wall in the distance. They wore the same clothes and looked young. They were mainly responsible for picking up the bouncing basketballs. Sometimes they were also responsible for defending and passing the ball. These people should be the legendary ball boys. Among them, Jiang Hai saw a familiar figure. It should be the guy who played one-on-one with him on the basketball court. He seemed to be called John, but it was John in white. Oh, you're here. Come, Jiang, follow him over there. I've arranged a shooting trainer for you. They'll evaluate your various abilities. I've heard Bradley talk about your godly shooting skills. Show us. When he saw Jiang Hai and Bradley coming over, Brad Stevens immediately looked at Jiang Hai and spoke to him. As his voice fell, 2 coaches came over and took Jiang Hai to the half of the empty court next to them. How is he? Watching Jiang Hai being taken away by the 2 coaches, Brad Stevens pulled Avery and Bradley aside and asked in a low voice. Hearing his words, Bradley could not help but feel a little hesitant. I'll give you a reminder. You can call him a monster. Mr. Bree will give you the specific data later. After that, Bradley did not say more and ran directly to the court to practice shooting to warm up. As for Jiang Hai, at this time he ran to the other half of the court. An assistant coach told Jiang Hai how to run in a while. This was the most basic outside zigzag running position. From the bottom corner of the left or right side, then run all the way up. After running to a 45-degree angle in the opposite direction, then run straight inside. After running past the backboard, then turn around and run outside the three-point line. Then run along the arc to a 45-degree angle on the opposite side, then run straight inside, then turn around and run out of the three-point line. Looking at it from above, this was a bit like a zigzag, which was the basic running position of all guards. Since it was a basic running position, it was not complicated. After the assistant coach ran it once, Jiang Hai knew how to do it. What he had to do was to receive the ball from the assistant coach at any time while running in these positions, then immediately catch the ball and shoot. This was also the training that tested a person's shooting accuracy the most. However, it seemed to be too simple for Jiang Hai. Brush, 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 brush. Jiang Hai did not hesitate to hit the shots one after another. They were all empty baskets. After all, it was just within the three-point line, and the furthest place was outside the three-point line. For Jiang Hai, such a distance was not difficult to hit. It's not interesting. Let's make the range bigger. Finally, after more than 30 consecutive shots, Jiang Hai stopped and said to the assistant coach. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the assistant coach also glanced at Brad Stevens in the distance. In fact, Stevens had been observing Jiang Hai in the distance. He found that Jiang Hai's shooting was really a bug. The main reason why he went to look for Jiang Hai to try was that Bradley had said that Jiang Hai could continuously hit long three-pointers. As for what he said, the half-court area was the attacking point, and the shooting accuracy was 100%. Stevens himself did not believe it. After all, this was a real world, not a fantasy world. How could there be such a terrifying skill? If it was really so terrifying, then what was the point of the game? After the half-court period, the ball would be given to him and then everyone would pull away. When was basketball so easy? Why didn't he know? So he only listened to it as a joke, but now that he saw Jiang Hai shooting, it seemed to be really good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bradley thought for a moment, nodded and agreed to Jiang Hai's proposal. Seeing that he nodded, Jiang Hai smiled and took the basketball from an assistant coach. He came to a place one step away from the three-point line. Without saying anything, he took off and shot directly. However, the basketball was still the same as before. It went straight to the empty basket. Then 2 steps, 3 steps. 1.5 meters away from the basket, it was still an empty basket. Seeing this scene, Brad Stevens felt a little confused. Could it be that what Bradley said was true? At this time, more people also noticed Jiang Hai, who was practicing shooting in the distance. The terrifying three-point shot was really terrifying. Cough, we seem to have found a monster. At this time, Brian Bowe came in from the outside, took a form and handed it to Brad Stevens. Seeing the form handed over by Brian Bowe, Brad Stevens's hand suddenly trembled, and then he looked at the guy who was losing 3 points in the half-court period with a horrified look. Are you sure you didn't write it wrong? Looking at Brian Bowe's form, Brad Stevens said with a puzzled look. I swear to God. Hearing what Brad Stevens said, Brian Bowe also said with a serious face. Hiss, if this is true, then this guy is really a monster, a super monster. Looking at the information in front of him, Brad Stevens's eyes were about to spit fire. Then he glanced at Jiang Hai, who continued to shoot there. He thought for a moment. He now saw Jiang Hai's shooting ability, but he still didn't know how good his shooting ability was under defense, so he wanted to try it. Thinking of this, he put the information aside for the time being, and then he clapped his hands hard. Everyone gather here first, let's play a 15-minute team practice game. Hearing Brad Stevens's words, the eyes of the people who were going to watch Jiang Hai practice shooting three-pointers were attracted. Hearing the head coach's instructions, everyone did not dare to neglect. After all, there was no real boss on this team, so naturally Brad's prestige was the strongest on the team. Jiang, you come here too. Let me explain. We are going to have a 15-minute 5-on-5 game. Your performance will determine your playing time tonight. Looking at the people in front of him, Brad said with a serious face. At present, the Celtics have signed a total of 15 players. In addition to the veterans Gerald Wallace, Marcus Thornton, and James Young who can't play because of injuries, there are 12 people who can play. Among these 12 people, there is no absolute saying who is the main force and who is the substitute. Whoever plays well may be the main force, whoever plays poorly may also be the substitute. When it came to the timing of their appearance, the faces of these people instantly became serious. Jared, Salinger, Evan Turner, Avery Bradley, Tyler Zeller, Jeff Green, your team change into a white vest. J. Claude, Kelly Olenek, Marcus Smart, Brandon Bass, and Jiang, you guys change into a yellow vest. At the end of his speech, Brad suddenly paused and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing that there was something for him to do, Jiang Hai was a little surprised, but he did not say much. He just changed into a vest. Although he was not interested in playing in the NBA or playing professionally, since he said he wanted to come over to have fun, he naturally would not give up halfway. He went to the side to change into a vest and briefly communicated with his teammates. Are you playing the power forward or the power forward? The point guard of the yellow team, Marcus Smart, walked to Jiang Hai's side and asked him. Marcus Smart was the 6th rookie in the first round this year. The reason why the Celtics traded Rondo was mainly because of him. Although this guy looked like a prick, he had a very good personality. He was willing to do anything on the court to help the team. He was not the same kind of person as the current point guards who focused on offense. His defense was above average and his offense was above average. He was very active in grabbing rebounds, and his ability to draw fouls was not bad. Most importantly, he had a heart that wanted to win. Even if it was just a mock competition, he wanted to win. He did not want to lose. The power forward. After thinking about it, although Jiang Hai's height was more suitable to play the power forward, Jiang Hai was very clear that although he had played with his dribbling at home for the past 2 days, it was limited to jogging and would not be broken. If he wanted to run or step over, it was better not to think about it. Under such circumstances, it was better to play the power forward. That's fine. In a while you will stand in the position you are familiar with. I will pass the ball to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marcus Smart smiled at Jiang Hai. Then the 10 people walked on the court and prepared for today's practice game. Chapter 103. The white team did not have a true point guard, so Avery and Bradley was going to play the point guard, Evan Turner was the 2nd, Jeff Green was the 3rd, Tyler Zeller was the 4th, and Jared Salinger was the 5th. On the yellow team, Marcus Smart was the point guard, Jiang Hai was the 2nd, J. Claude was the 3rd, Brandon Bass was the 4th, and Kelly Olenek was the 5th. Compared to the white team, the yellow team was obviously a substitute team. Although the current Celtics did not have an obvious main player or substitute, it was easy to tell who was more famous in this team. Currently, the most famous player on the team should be Gerald Wallace. However, because this daredevil worked too hard in the past, he aged very quickly. The original all-star player was now completely reduced to a substitute and a water cooler guard. He was covered in injuries and it was not easy for him to recover. Apart from him, the most famous player was Jamil Nelson, who was once an all-star player in Orlando. However, after coming to the Celtics as a bargaining chip in the trade for Rajon Rondo, he understood that it was no longer his era. He was probably only going to be a 3rd substitute here, not much different from when he was with the Mavericks. Apart from these two, basically all the other big names were on the white team. Jeff Green was one of the 3 young masters of the Thunder. Avery and Bradley was the current boss of the team. Evan Turner was once the core of the Sixers. Of course, he did not become a core player in the end, but at least he was once a boss. With such a team, it should not be a problem to beat Jiang Hai's yellow team. As the 2 teams played the jump ball, Olenek, a hard-working Caucasian, was not as athletic as Salinger, who was once comparable to Andre Drummond, the core player of the Pistons. So the jump ball was easily sent to the white team. After Avery and Bradley received the ball, they slowly pushed across the half court. The point guards of the 2 teams were the type that lacked offense but had enough defense, so Bradley was not in a hurry to attack. Instead, he first played his advantage, the point guard. As the ball was passed to Jeff Green from the waist position, Jeff Green also tried to lean on J. Claude behind him. Even though J. Claude had already defended very seriously, Jeff Green still leaned on him and used him as a fulcrum to turn and slide into the inside line. Olenek saw him come in and hesitated for a moment. He did not go up to defend because he was the only one inside at that moment. If he went up to defend and Jeff Green passed the ball, he would be in trouble. Under such circumstances, Jeff Green naturally did not hold back. With a light one-handed dunk, the ball went into the basket. 2 points, the white team was in the lead. Seeing Kelly Olenek's performance, Brad Stevens also noted something on his tactical board, but at that moment, no one had the time or leisure to look at him. When the white team's offense ended, it was the yellow team's turn. This time, Marcus Smart and Brandon Bass did a pick and roll to attract the opponent's change of defense in the lane and then passed the ball to Brandon Bass. Brandon Bass was also a very strange player. He was also a veteran player and had been in the league for 10 years. However, as a black man he did not rely on his weight, his athletic talent, or his defense to stay in the league. Instead he relied on his mid-range shooting. Apart from the first 2 years when he was with the Hornets, the team that was now renamed the Pelicans, he had some stumbling when he played there. Then, when he came to the Mavericks he just happened to be in the Mavericks' most glorious period. As Nowitzki's substitute, he practiced a decent mid-range shot. Then, when he came to the Magic he gradually made a name for himself. Then he joined the Celtics and was considered a rotation point for the main force in the team. He usually played as a substitute, but also as a main force. It mainly depended on the opponent's situation. If the opponent's inside lane was too heavy to defend, then he would play as the main force. If the opponent's inside lane was very flexible, then he would play as a substitute. He could be considered a player who could do anything with one move. Now, after receiving the pass from Marcus Smart, facing Avery and Bradley's defense, he did not need to worry too much because of his height advantage. He received the ball and dodged to the side. Then he jumped straight up and threw the ball. The ball hit the inside of the basket and bounced into the net. The score on both sides was 2-2. Attacking again, Avery and Bradley prepared to pass the ball to Jeff Green with the intention of attacking the strong points. However, he unexpectedly found that Evan Turner, who was standing in front of Jiang Hai, was asking for the ball with his hand open. Seeing this scene, Avery and Bradley was stunned for a moment. Then he hesitated. It was not that he was unwilling to pass the ball to Evan Turner, but because he knew how strong Jiang Hai's defense was. Evan Turner did not know, but he knew very well. That was why he did not pass the ball to Evan Turner, who seemed to be stronger. However, Evan Turner did not understand. He was now asking for the ball with his hand open. After hesitating for a moment, Avery and Bradley still passed the ball to him. He did this to protect Evan Turner's face and also to let Jiang Hai show his strength. As for whether Evan Turner would explode, after receiving the ball, Evan Turner pressed his body down and looked at Jiang Hai in front of him with a serious face. He did not talk trash. In fact, in the Celtics, other than a few old hooligans, there were not many people who liked to talk trash. Evan Turner was also a quiet kid, but it was precisely because of his quietness that he did not feel comfortable in every team. Thinking back, before Evan Turner entered the NBA, he could be said to be the best college player in the United States. In 2009-10 he received all the honors that a college player could receive: the John Wooden Award, the Oscar Robertson Award, the Naismith Award, the Associated Press Player of the Year, and the National Player of the Year. All of them were his. When he entered the competition, the evaluation of the scouts could not be higher. He was a scoring machine that was impossible to guard against. He could create opportunities for his teammates. He had an extremely high ability to end games. He was a tenacious defender who was passionate about grabbing rebounds and steals. He could shoot, cut, shoot from long range, pass, grab rebounds, and block. His mind was always very clear on the court. His performance was extraordinary, he had extremely high leadership, and he was an all-round flank player. However, such a guy who was praised to the sky by the media and scouts struggled quite a bit after being selected by the Sixers with the second pick. The Sixers even sent away the original boss of the team, the small AI, Andre Iguodala, for him. However, his performance was quite unsatisfactory. His offense and defense were unstable. Although there was no problem with his attitude, his physical fitness was too poor. He had the ability to pass the ball, but it was above average. At the same time, it was easy for him to pass the ball. His rebounding ability was not bad among the guards, but when it came to the small forward, it was a little worse. With unlimited shooting rights and the halo of the team's boss, his average points per game in the first 2 seasons were only 7, 2 and 9, 4. Although he broke 10 points in the last 2 seasons, there was no eye-catching situation at all. His average points per game in the third year was 13, 3 points per game, and in the fourth year was 17, 4 points per game. Obviously this was not what a boss should have. Later, the Sixers traded him to the Pacers at the last moment of the last season. His performance in the Pacers was not very good. With the end of the rookie's 4-year contract, he joined the Celtics this year. However, what was inconsistent with his status as the number 2 rookie was that he only had a salary of $6.72 million for 2 years. Therefore, he urgently needed to make a name for himself in these 2 years. Therefore, even if it was an internal team practice game, he would give it his all. Evan Turner, who was holding the ball, stood in front of Jiang Hai. His eyes were fixed on Jiang Hai's shoulder and he was ready to break through. His height of 2.1 meters was extremely intimidating in front of Jiang Hai. This made it seem as if he had already defeated Jiang Hai, But Jiang Hai was very calm at this time. He looked at the guy in front of him indifferently. Finally, Evan Turner moved. As he slammed the basketball on the ground, he also moved in an instant and broke through to Jiang Hai's left side. However, just as he was about to move, he unexpectedly found that Jiang Hai had already appeared in front of him. However, this had long been expected. He changed his center of gravity in an instant and dribbled the ball. At the same time, he was ready to break through to the right side. However, at this time, Jiang Hai appeared again and firmly blocked in front of him. This breakthrough by force. One change of direction was not Evan Turner's limit, but at this time he was not prepared to do too many moves. His physical fitness was not very good. He was really not very good at changing directions at the last minute. Fortunately, he thought that in a situation where he had the advantage in terms of strength and height, breaking through by force might be a good choice. Therefore, he forced his way to the inside of the three-point line. However, when his body leaned against Jiang Hai's body, the powerful force even forced him to take a step. This kind of strength really made him a little scared. However, as an NBA starter, he still had his own ability. Although he was almost stopped by the collision, he did not stop. Instead, he continued to hold the ball and moved forward. One step, two steps. He had already reached about 2 o'clock of the free throw point. He forcefully carried Jiang Hai and wanted to break through. However, would Jiang Hai give him such a chance? As he jumped, Jiang Hai jumped as well. Evan Turner only felt his vision blur. In the next second, half of Jiang Hai's body appeared in front of him. Because he had just wrestled with Jiang Hai, he did not jump high. At this time, his line of sight was almost parallel to Jiang Hai's chest. How was he going to shoot? Jiang Hai gave him a very good choice, and that was not to shoot. Under Evan Turner's surprised gaze, Jiang Hai's right hand instantly pressed on the basketball between his raised hands. As Jiang Hai's right arm exerted force, a huge force came through. Chapter 104. Dong. With a muffled sound, the basketball in Evan Turner's hand was forcibly stabbed down by Jiang Hai's right hand. When the basketball fell to the ground, Evan Turner also fell to the ground again. His legs went soft and he sat on the floor. There was no other way. Jiang Hai's strength just now was too great. Attack, attack, attack. After Jiang Hai landed on the ground, he didn't give anyone a chance. He grabbed the basketball and gave it to Smart. At the same time, he rushed to the front court while shouting, "So strong." Looking at Jiang Hai's back, Evan Turner whispered. He underestimated Jiang Hai. He did not expect this guy's speed to be so fast and jump so high. Just now, when there was physical contact, this guy's jump should be more than 1 meter. Under such circumstances, his strength is still so great. Where did this monster come from? Looking at Jiang Hai, who had rushed to his half of the court, Evan Turner gritted his teeth and muttered. However, he was still very professional. He gritted his teeth and chased after Jiang Hai. But at this time, Jiang Hai's speed was at full speed. After Marcus Smart took the basketball, he immediately broke into the opponent's half of the court. However, Avery and Bradley blocked his path. Seeing that he had no chance and seeing Jiang Hai rushing behind him, Marcus Smart threw the ball to Jiang Hai. Originally, according to his idea, Jiang Hai would stop at this time and shoot a three-pointer. Just now, he saw Jiang Hai's shooting ability. In his opinion, it was very trustworthy. Or Jiang Hai could break in and shoot 2 points. After all, Evan Turner had not caught up yet. However, he found that Jiang Hai was destined to take an unusual path. About half a meter away from the three-point line, Jiang Hai received the basketball. The moment he received the ball, he did not slow down. Instead, he took the ball directly and rushed toward the inside of the three-point line. After a big stride, he had stepped into a position about 20 centimeters away from the three-point line. It's over. This guy treats basketball as football. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, John on the sidelines couldn't help but say with a smile. The others on the sidelines were also stunned for a moment, then sighed, especially Marcus Smart. It seemed that his fast attack was going to be Jiang Hai's mistake, but would Jiang Hai really make a mistake? At least he didn't think so. After the first step, he took another big step and stepped straight into the 3-second zone. Just as everyone was surprised, Jiang Hai soared into the air at this time. He jumped high and far. Before any of the players could react, Jiang Hai had already flown to the side of the basket as if he had grown a pair of wings. He exerted force with both hands and buckled down. Clang! Only a loud noise was heard. Then they saw Jiang Hai hanging high above the basket and the basketball bounced under the basket. This was the first time that Jiang Hai sprinted from the backcourt and jumped for a slam dunk. There was only one word to describe it: cool. Yahoo! With a whistle, Jiang Hai jumped down from the basket and high-fived Marcus Smart, who was still in a sluggish state. Then he ran back to defend. As for the others, they were a little confused. While these people were in a daze, Brad Stevens's eyes lit up on the sidelines. He knew that Jiang Hai's physical fitness was good, but he didn't expect it to be so good. 3 steps from the three-point line? This kind of thing happened during a fast attack. It was really too surprising. At least it took some time for him to react. We must sign him no matter what the cost. Imagine if Jiang Hai did this in the game. Although the impact on the game was only 2 points on the surface, the impact on the morale was imaginable. If this monster was released, no one knew how big of an impact it would have on the basketball world. However, when he thought about how he was the one who released this monster, he felt his heart begin to twitch for no reason. This monster. At this time, Evan Turner, who saw the scene behind Jiang Hai, had no other choice but to smile bitterly and helplessly. For the following ball, except for Avery and Bradley, who was mentally prepared, the others were a little confused. So, the ball naturally didn't hit the target. After Olenek grabbed the rebound, he passed it to Marcus Smart. Smart dribbled the ball across the half of the court and happened to see Jiang Hai slowly running across the half of the court. Thinking about Jiang Hai's explosive dunk, he felt that this ball should also be played by Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai received the ball, and Evan Turner on the opposite side immediately greeted him. His pair of long arms waved in front of Jiang Hai. But this time he was mainly defending against breakthroughs. He also knew that Jiang Hai's shooting was good, but now Jiang Hai had just crossed the half of the court. In his impression, Jiang Hai was definitely going to break through or dribble the ball up. But unfortunately, if he guessed correctly, then Jiang Hai would not be Jiang Hai. Looking at Evan Turner in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and then jumped directly in front of him. Who the F***CK? Seeing Jiang Hai's unconventional way of playing cards, Evan Turner immediately took a step forward and wanted to defend against Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai had already jumped high at this time. In everyone's surprised eyes, Jiang Hai threw the basketball 1 step away from the center line. The basketball drew a beautiful arc and plunged into the basket. I told you that within his half of the court he can hit all the shots and his accuracy is unusually high. Seeing that everyone was getting more and more stunned, Avery and Bradley shrugged helplessly and said to them. Thinking back to when he first came back, he told his teammates and coach about Jiang Hai. But none of these people believed him at that time. Now, facts speak louder than words and he didn't need to say anything more. Then, how do we defend against this? Hearing Avery and Bradley's words, Evan Turner couldn't help but hesitate and said to him. Hearing what he said, Avery and Bradley shrugged and then pointed to Brad Stevens on the sidelines. His meaning was very clear. Don't ask me, ask the boss. Seeing his appearance, Evan Turner sighed. It seems that I'm going to suffer today. It turned out that his guess was quite correct. He was indeed going to suffer. Smart attacked again, and Smart seemed to recognize Jiang Hai's point. He passed the ball again and Jiang Hai didn't let him down. He caught the ball from a long distance and easily hit it. After 4 consecutive shots, Evan Turner had to go around and directly prevent Jiang Hai from catching the ball. However, he could prevent Jiang Hai from catching the ball, but he could just go inside the three-point line. With a flash, he rushed inside the three-point line. Smart saw Jiang Hai running and making gestures at the same time. Without saying anything, he directly hung the ball inside the three-point line. After all, this ball was a little far away, so it was hung a little high. However, for Jiang Hai, it didn't matter how high it was because he could get it no matter how high it was. Suddenly, under everyone's gaze, Jiang Hai jumped straight into the air and blocked Marcus Smart's pass at an absolute height. In an instant, his lower abdomen tightened. It felt as if Jiang Hai had stopped in the air. Before Zeller could react, he calmly dunked the ball into the basket. Wow, this is the first time I know that assists are so easy to get. The balls that were given to Jiang Hai were all given out by him. As a point guard, this was the first time Smart realized that it was so easy to be an assistant. If he played a game with Jiang Hai, would it be possible to break Stockton's NBA assist record? Thinking of this, his eyes became brighter and brighter, and Brad Stevens' eyes on the sidelines became even brighter. Sign him. No matter what, we have to sign him. Even if we give him a mid-level contract, we have to sign him. Just sign him for 1 year. Even if we give him the highest salary next year, it doesn't matter. We have to sign him. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was having fun and smiling brightly on the court, Brad Stevens' expression didn't change, but in fact, his hands in his pockets were trembling. In a while, sort out the video of this game. I want to use it. Looking at the stunned assistant coach on the sidelines, Stevens whispered. Hearing Stevens's words, the assistant coach was stunned for a moment, then nodded to show that he understood. This training game that followed was almost all for Jiang Hai. By the time Jiang Hai left the court, he had already played a full quarter of the game, 12 minutes. In these 12 minutes, Jiang Hai made a total of 12 of 13 shots, 7 of 7 three-pointers. There was a dunk, but his strength was too great, so he clasped the back of the basket and didn't dunk it in. In addition to this one shot, he made all his other shots. In 12 minutes he scored 31 points. What's the current NBA record for a quarter? If I remember correctly, it should be Iceman George Gwynn and Mellon Carmelo Anthony with 33 points in a quarter. Now Jiang Hai easily scored 31 points without being the focus of the offense. Does that mean that he can break this record at any time if he wants to? Thinking about it, Brad Stevens was really a little excited. In addition to these 31 points, the other 4 blocked shots and 3 rebounds didn't seem so important. You take Jiang Hai to Mr. Angie first. I'll sort out the video and then I'll be there. Thinking of this, Brad Stevens's determination to sign Jiang Hai became stronger and stronger. He didn't wait for the end of the practice and directly pulled Avery and Bradley next to him. Then he handed the matter over to the assistant coach and left with the videographer. They needed to edit this 15-minute training game. As for Jiang Hai, he was taken by Avery to take a shower first. He washed off the sweat on his body, changed back to his original clothes, and went to the building on the other side of the arena. Today's second update was continuously delivered. If he didn't post it, there would be people scolding him. In fact, if he posted it, there would probably be people scolding him. Xiao Fei had been writing books for many years and had encountered a lot of readers. It was normal for them to give opinions when they read books. Xiao Fei would also give opinions when he read books. Generally speaking, Xiao Fei would add comments, of course, when Xiao Fei thought about it. However, there were always some people who posted threatening and insulting words. Generally, when he encountered such posts, Xiao Fei's way of dealing with them was to not delete them and ignore them. If he deleted them, they would have more to say. What about deleting the post? What about disrespecting the readers? Xiao Fei just ignored them. However, the things that these people said were more or less in his book. Although sometimes they were nitpicking, at least it proved that they had read his book. However, there were also some people who posted inexplicable comments. They obviously posted things that weren't in his book. There were also a bunch of replies below as if they were real. Xiao Fei didn't know whether they were paid posters or just trolls. Regarding this, Xiao Fei felt very helpless. The people who could see this paragraph were actually people who followed Xiao Fei's book. Xiao Fei said a few words and complained, and everyone could understand. This book was now in Sanjiang. Although Xiao Fei didn't want Sanjiang to be first or second, if everyone felt that this book was okay, please vote for Sanjiang. If it stayed in the last place, no one would be proud, right? Chapter 105. The composition of an NBA team was not inferior to that of a large multinational corporation. It was not much different. In addition to the boss and the board of directors, the responsibilities of the club were also extremely strict. The general manager, the deputy general manager, the scouting department, the finance department, the publicity department, the internal affairs department, the legal department, the marketing department, the human resources department. It could be said that there were hundreds of people in the surrounding departments that were formed around the basketball team. This did not include the surrounding departments such as the security inside the stadium, the people in charge of the surrounding shops, and the people who managed the small vendors, etc. In addition to these non-basketball people, there were many people related to basketball. The scouting department mentioned earlier was naturally one of them. The scouting department was generally planned under the general manager or the head coach. It depended on who had more say in the team, the manager or the head coach. If it was the Lakers, it would probably be under the general manager. If it was the Spurs, it would definitely be under the head coach. After all, Brad Stevens was still young for the current Celtics, so it was under the general manager, Danny Ainge. As for how many people there were in the scouting department, it was uncertain. However, there would be at least 6 or 7 official scouts, plus their assistants. After all, the people they were in charge of were different. Some of them were in charge of the NCAA in the western United States, the central United States, and the eastern United States. Some were in charge of high schools, some were in charge of low-level leagues, and some were in charge of overseas, Europe, Asia, South America, Australia, etc. The NBA placed a lot of emphasis on scouting. After all, what was the most important thing in this era? It was talent. In addition to the scouts, there were also many nutritionists in the cafeteria. Naturally, there were also many assistant coaches. It was like playing a game. Sometimes, a head coach would even have as many as a dozen assistant coaches. First of all, there had to be a first assistant coach responsible for arranging and practicing the tactics that the head coach had prepared. Next, there was an offensive tactics coach, a defensive tactics coach, and a fitness coach. These were the three most basic coaches. Under these coaches, there was also a shooting coach, an offensive coach under the basket, a positioning coach, a defensive drill coach, and so on. The fitness coach was also divided into basic fitness coach, strength coach, assault coach, and so on. In addition, there was also a team doctor. All in all, the NBA club was a huge organization. It was not as simple as what Jiang Hai had seen on TV. With so many people, it was naturally impossible to squeeze together with the players, so they had their own separate office building. Of course, there were also some teams that would work together in order to save space, or if the original training center was really built very large. For example, the Cavaliers Training Center and the Mavericks Training Center. The level of luxury of their training centers was not inferior to their home court. However, the Celtics were a century-old team, and they were not known for their wealth. Therefore, they naturally had to save money. Now Jiang Hai and the others arrived at another building. Although the two buildings were separated, they were connected by a bridge, so there was no need to walk outside, which was troublesome. Not long after, Jiang Hai was taken by Avery and Bradley to an office. He respectfully knocked on the door. Not long after, Danny Ainge's voice came from inside. The two of them pushed the door open and walked in. As for John and Louis, they were very perceptive. They went to the parking lot to wait for Jiang Hai. It was better for outsiders like them to not be present when the contract was being discussed. "Sir, I brought Jiang Hai here." Walking into the office, Avery and Bradley spoke to the old man sitting behind the desk. Jiang Hai nodded at him. Was a greeting. "Well, Avery, you go back to training first. I'm looking forward to your performance tonight." Looking at the two people who walked in, Danny Ainge chuckled and said to Avery and Bradley. Hearing his words, Bradley did not say much. Instead, he turned and left. Before he left, he patted Jiang Hai on the shoulder. Jiang Hai could only pout. He probably knew what these people were going to say, but he was really not interested in becoming a professional player. The main reason he played basketball was to have fun, not to make money. Whether it was for money, for a leisurely life, or for his own condition, staying in the manor was the best choice. Don't forget, Jiang Hai was still counting on his own real dragon spirit to level up. But since he was already here, he might as well listen to what they had to say. Then Jiang Hai sat on the sofa opposite him under his signal. "Since you're here, Mr. Jiang Hai, I think we'll get straight to the point. I think our team needs you. This is a short contract for 10 days. If there are no problems, I think you can sign him. This is an opportunity. If we are satisfied with your performance in 10 days, you will get a guaranteed contract until the end of the season." Seeing Jiang Hai sit down, Danny Ainge obviously did not have the leisure and time to talk to a little kid like Jiang Hai. Hearing Danny Ainge's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. "Sorry, you just said a short contract for 10 days? Although Jiang Hai did not plan to be a professional player, what the hell was a short contract for 10 days? He had such a strong performance and he was only going to give him a short contract for 10 days? To use a phrase often seen in domestic NBA forums, Jiang Hai felt insulted. "Yes, you're right. Yes, I think you know your situation better than us. You are not a registered player in the Players' Union, so we need to help you register. Secondly, you have not received formal training, and you are already 27 years old. You don't have much potential to speak of. But since you can sit in front of me, that means you have proven yourself with your strength. You can stay. I am willing to believe in Brad, so we are willing to give you this opportunity." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Danny Ainge said without changing his expression. "Ahem, maybe Bradley did not make things clear to you. First, I'm used to being lazy. I came today just to test the limits of my body, so I have no intention of joining you. Second, even if I wanted to join, I would not sign a short contract for 10 days. Don't worry, let me finish. I'm not an Asian teenager with dreams. Living for basketball, dying for basketball, fighting for basketball for a lifetime, and so on, that is not my original intention. I am a manor owner. My manor is in the suburbs of Boston, in Winthrop. It is a huge manor that gathers a ranch, a fishing farm, and a winery." Looking at Danny Ainge in front of him, Jiang Hai said indifferently, "I just spent $280 million to buy this manor this year. I'm not saying this to show that I am rich. I know that compared to some famous stars or team owners, $280 million is not a big deal. But I just want to tell you that I am not short of money. So, I think our conversation about the contract can end here." Clearing his throat, Jiang Hai looked at Danny Ainge and said very seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Danny Ainge was also stunned. This was the first time he had seen such an amazing rookie. What was this guy thinking? Although I feel sorry, our conversation may have to end here. But Danny Ainge was not a little guy who had just entered society. Pretending to be tough with him, could you be tougher than him? Well, he thought Jiang Hai was pretending. But Jiang Hai did not say anything about this. He just stood up, shook hands with him and left his office. Although he was in a bad mood after coming out, overall, Jiang Hai was still quite happy today. At least he knew where his limits were. After coming out of Danny Ainge's office, he did not go back to Avery and Bradley or Brad Stevens to talk about this. Instead, he went directly to the parking lot downstairs. There, the Turner brothers had been waiting for a long time. Hey bro, how was it? Did they sign you? As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, John immediately asked Jiang Hai. No. Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai didn't elaborate. It was quite shameful to talk about it. He was a billionaire, but someone threw a 10-day contract in his face. He really couldn't afford to lose this face. That's a pity. But bro, with your physical fitness, it would be even more of a pity if you signed. With your physical fitness you should play rugby. Looking at Jiang Hai, John immediately said. Well, it seems that his true love is rugby. Well, let's go back. He opened the door of his F-650 and sat in the driver's seat. Then, under the envious eyes of John and Louis, he stepped on the accelerator and the car sped toward the exit of the parking lot. That's the car a man should drive. Looking at Jiang Hai's back, Louis muttered in a low voice. Well bro, with your salary you can forget about it in your life. Hearing Louis's sigh, John couldn't help but pour cold water on him, and then got into the passenger seat of Louis's car with a smile. Hearing his brother's words, Louis could not help but smack his lips. Yes, with my current salary I can forget about it. He lowered his head helplessly, got into the car, then stepped on the accelerator and sped toward the exit. Just as Jiang Hai and others left in the office building, Brad Stevens took a laptop and walked into Danny Ainge's office excitedly, but when he found that the office was empty, he couldn't help but be stunned. Danny, where is Jiang? Looking at Danny Ainge in front of him, Brad Stevens asked with some surprise. Although I don't know the strength of the person you and Avery like, his character is really not suitable to be a player. When I put the contract in front of him, he was not satisfied and left directly. Shrugging, Danny Ainge said with a smile. Oh, who the hell, you should have kept him, he is the new god of basketball, my god. Hearing Danny Ainge's words, even Brad couldn't help but swear. He threw down the laptop in his hand and left in a hurry. Is it necessary? Seeing Brad's gaffe, Danny Ainge couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then he laughed at himself. The new god of basketball? He didn't think that the new god of basketball would look like a Wuxia. Then he saw Brad put down the laptop and there seemed to be a video on it. Out of curiosity, Danny Ainge clicked on the play button. Chapter 106. Hey boss, how was it? Did they sign you? Driving back to his manor, Jiang Hai got out of the car and saw Robinsi and the others coming from the warehouse in the distance. It seemed that they had just cleared the snow. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Robinsi asked with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. They gave me a short 10-day contract. I'm not crazy, I'll sign that. Hearing what Robinsi said, Jiang Hai said angrily. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robinsi and the others also laughed. Jiang Hai really didn't need to go. By the way, boss, AI Dehua is looking for you. After chatting for a while, Jiang Hai was ready to go back. As for Louis and John, they also had to go home. Their female companions were still waiting for them at home. But just as Jiang Hai was about to leave, Robinsi suddenly said to Jiang Hai. Not long after Jiang Hai left, Edward Anderson came over. He didn't say anything and only said that he would call him when Jiang Hai came back. Okay, ask him to come to my house. Hearing Robinsi's words, Jiang Hai nodded. In fact, even if Edward Anderson didn't say it, Jiang Hai probably knew why he came to find him. It was nothing more than two things, fishing and fish farming. To be honest, Edward Anderson's position in this manor was the most awkward. Because others had their own things to do, but he had nothing to do after patrolling the fishing ground every day. This made the old fisherman feel that he took Jiang Hai's money but did nothing. He felt uneasy and didn't want to do anything. Therefore, he always wanted to find something for himself to do. He had to admit that sometimes people were very strange. For some people, he was happy to be paid all day long and not do anything. For example, Jiang Hai in the past. However, some people, such as Edward Anderson, had to do something once they were paid. Otherwise they would feel uncomfortable all over. Less than 10 minutes after Jiang Hai returned to his room, Edward Anderson, who smelled of the sea, walked in from outside. "Hey boss, I heard you went to the Celtics to be a player. How's it going?" As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson, who had changed his shoes outside, said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai helplessly threw a beer at him and said in a bad mood, "Don't mention it. Have a seat. What do you want?" "It's like this, boss. I want to ask if you have any plans to raise fish this year." After receiving the beer that Jiang Hai threw over, Ai Dehua didn't rush to open it. Instead, he put the beer on the table and asked Jiang Hai somewhat awkwardly. "Well, I can't say that I don't have any plans, but it depends on the funds." Thinking about the money left in his bank account, Jiang Hai rubbed his temples helplessly. When could he say that money was just a string of numbers? It's already January. If you want to raise fish this year, you have to speed it up. Of course, if you don't want to raise fish now, you can still get some income from the fish farm. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson also sighed. He knew that Jiang Hai had invested more money in the ranch, which was more profitable, so the plan for the fish farm would naturally be delayed. However, now that he heard Jiang Hai's words, he also felt a little helpless. "Actually, no one will go against the Green Franklin, right? But I remember hearing you say that if we raise fish in the fish farm, it will cost at least tens of millions of dollars. But with me, apart from the tax that needs to be paid in April, I can only use about $10 million. This money is not enough." After hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shrug helplessly. For him, it was great to be able to make a lot of money, but the problem now was that he didn't have enough money. Jiang Hai didn't have the strength to manage bank loans and so on. He didn't want to owe anyone money, even if it was the government. "Actually, if we raise fish, we don't have to raise so many at the beginning. The tens of millions I mentioned is the price of raising fish in saturated conditions. If we are not saturated, it won't be too troublesome. And if you have some shortage of money, we can make up for it with the sea we have now," Edward Anderson immediately said when he saw that Jiang Hai wanted to raise fish. "What do you mean?" Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai looked at him with some surprise. The most expensive cost of raising fish, in addition to the money for the fry, is to build a natural environment and food chain suitable for their growth. But in the past few months, I have been checking the situation of our fish farm. I found that the original food chain in our fish farm is quite stable. We only need to plant more seaweed and then introduce some Arctic shrimp, crabs, cuttlefish and octopus, and it will be enough to raise millions of cod fry, Ai Dehua said immediately when he saw Jiang Hai asking him. It takes at least 5 to 7 years for a cod fry to grow into an adult, which is to say to reach the state of sexual maturity. If it was in the south it would only take 3 to 4 years, but this is the north, so there is no other way. But if it only reaches the state where it can be sold for money, raising it for a year is about the same. The size of a yearling cod, if it is adequately nourished and there are no natural predators, it is not a problem for it to grow to about 20 centimeters, and such a cod is about a pound. Based on the current price of fish, a pound of cod was about 2 yuan. With a few million fish, the annual income would be close to 10 million yuan. There was no need to think about making money, but they would not lose too much. Most importantly, this was only the first year. Because the construction of the food chain had cost too much, in the second year, just the cost of labor and fish hatchlings would be enough to make a profit. If the heavens opened their eyes, they would be able to turn a profit after 3 years of peace. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai can't help but smack his lips. If there was no profit from the ranch, Jiang Hai might have listened to Edward Anderson and raised cod. After all, this kind of fish has a large sales volume. As long as it is raised, there is no need to worry about sales. Most importantly, this fish is easy to raise, has a high survival rate, and is not easy to die. It is the best choice to raise a large number of fish. But now, after hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai does not want to raise this kind of fish, because it is too cheap. Whether it was raising fish or cattle, Jiang Hai wasn't worried about the quality of these animals because he had the support of his blood. Although he was always bleeding, this made him somewhat speechless. He hoped that after leveling up, he would be able to solve this problem. But at least he wasn't helpless. He had a way to kill them, so this gave him the idea that he could raise more dangerous fish. Cod was a safe species, so he didn't like it because it was too cheap. Can we raise some more expensive fish such as tuna, Atlantic salmon, rainbow trout, grouper, and so on? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai recognized that these are the only more expensive edible fish, so he asked Edward. This can't be tuna. This tuna can't be farmed. This thing runs around for its whole life and will die if it is trapped in one place. Atlantic salmon can be farmed, but this kind of fish is a migratory fish. It needs to grow in fresh water for the first 4 years. If we only buy a 4-year-old half cub, the cost will be very high because a 4-year-old Atlantic salmon is actually very valuable. Rainbow trout and Atlantic salmon are the same. We only have the sea and there are no fresh rivers or lakes. This kind of migratory fish is not very easy to farm. Finally, grouper can be farmed, but the price of this thing is not high, about the same as cod. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, AI Dehua analyzed with Jiang Hai. Everyone in the world knew that tuna was expensive, but no one in the world had raised this thing because this thing, like some sharks, needed to constantly swim in order to get oxygen, and most importantly, this kind of fish lived in groups. In other words, to raise tuna, one must first have a large enough body of water to let these fish swim continuously in order to get oxygen, but the oxygen in this body of water was fixed, and if one raised too much, they would suffocate to death. It was also impossible to get oxygen in the sea. If one raised too little, there would not be enough money to raise the fish, so far no one had raised this thing at all. It was said that Japan was now raising it, but no one knew the progress of raising it. As for salmon and rainbow trout, everyone knew that this kind of fish was very valuable, especially wild ones, but the problem was in front of them. How to raise migratory fish. Directly raising them in the sea, the cost was too high. If they didn't raise them, where could they find a river to raise small fish? These were all problems. Finally, the grouper, this thing's range was too wide. There were expensive ones and there were also cheap ones. The cheap ones were like gold grouper, green grouper, gentian grouper, pearl gentian, and so on. They were all very cheap and even the price was not much different from cod. The expensive ones were like tiger grouper, eastern star grouper, and these were all expensive. However, eastern star grouper could only be raised in the southern Indian Ocean. This was a tropical fish and the same was true for tiger grouper, a tropical fish. As for the most expensive mouse grouper, it was not a grouper but a perch family. Its scientific name was humpback perch. Although this kind of fish could also be raised, its survival rate was quite low. Now, many people raised this fish as an ornamental fish. It could be seen how difficult it was to raise this kind of fish, so for Jiang Hai's proposal, Edward Anderson could only smile awkwardly. He had to admit that sometimes his boss was really whimsical. These fish can't be raised? Alas, although I don't have any prejudice against codfish, this kind of fish can't be sold at a high price. I think you've seen and eaten the cows in our manor. My original intention was to only raise high-grade animals in our manor. I have a feeling that the animals raised in our manor are destined to be extraordinary. Something like codfish that can't be sold at a high price. Alas, think about it, is there anything that is easier to raise and can be sold at a high price? After hesitating for a while, Jiang Hai decided to tell AI Dehua some things. Of course he would not say more. He did not want to be targeted by others. Something that is more valuable, can be sold at a high price and is considered easy to raise. It seems that there is. Well, let's get to the point. Oh hee hee. Today's 2 chapters were delivered consecutively. Chapter 107. $40 for spotted shrimp, $30 for tiger-striped crab, $100 for king crab, $100 for geoduck, $30 for dragon crab, $12 for red crab, $240 for mozzarella, $40 for Atlantic salmon, $60 to $200 for bluefin tuna, $45 for yellowfin tuna, $65 for big-eye tuna, $100 for mozzarella tuna. Sitting in the car on the way to Boston, Jiang Hai looked at the form in his hand and muttered in a low voice. Edward Anderson, who was driving, glanced at Jiang Hai with a smile, then shook his head gently. Ever since Jiang Hai wanted to raise expensive seafood, he had been studying these things like a demon. He first looked up some information on the internet, then went to the local seafood market to ask about it. Of course, he also asked about Chinese restaurants. What he was muttering now was the data he had researched over the past few days. Of course, the unit was kilograms. In the United States, there was no such thing as kilograms. If it was converted to pounds, Jiang Hai was too lazy to do so. Aquatic products, especially marine products, naturally had different prices depending on location and size. He was talking about the normal average price, not the price of the premium quality. No matter what it was, as long as it was premium quality, the price would be unusually high. Take codfish, which Jiang Hai thought was worthless, as an example. As long as the codfish was more than 1 meter long, it would sell for thousands of dollars a day. If it was more than 1.5 meters, it would sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Normally, the codfish that could be sold were only 30 centimeters long, which was a little more than a caddy. 2 codfish added together would not even weigh 1.5 kilograms. That was the difference. As for the smaller ones, the ultra-low temperature ones could only be sold for 80 cents a pound, while the cold ones could be sold for $1.75 a pound. Jiang Hai had also heard of the term cold for the first time. There were 2 ways to preserve fish. One was to freeze the fish completely at a temperature of -60 degrees Celsius. Although this method would not spoil and was suitable for long-distance transportation, at the same time, it would also destroy the original taste of the fish. Generally speaking, other than large-scale fishing boats, very few fishing boats would do this. Of course, some cheaper fish would also do this. As for chilled fish, it was to use a low temperature to slightly freeze the fish. There was a limit to the freezing time. It could only be kept for 12 days, but if it was sold to the fishmonger on the 11th day, the fishmonger would not accept it. Basically, this kind of fish was caught in the morning and sold in the afternoon. Only then would people buy it. This kind of fish was basically expensive. If the price of a fish was not more than $30, fishermen would not be willing to put it in the cold storage. It should be known that the cold storage was just like the freezer layer of a refrigerator, while the cold storage was like an air conditioning room. The electricity it consumed was like diesel on the sea, which was extraordinarily high. Therefore, Jiang Hai had been looking for expensive sea fish in the market these days. So far, the situation was not bad. In fact, if one wanted to raise fish to make money, the best choice was still codfish. Because Jiang Hai's fish farm was next to Winthrop, it might be faster to sail by boat than by car. Here, after catching fish in the morning, they would sell them. They would definitely be chilled, and a pound could be sold for $1.75. Even if it was a pound per fish, according to Edward Anderson's idea, the survival rate of at least 60% after investing 10 million seedlings in the initial stage. That would be 6 million seedlings, $1.75 per fish, which added up to $10.5 million. Coupled with the income from the fish food, an annual income of $12 million shouldn't be a problem. However, the money invested in the seedlings, the second year's seedlings, the money to build the ecosystem, the money to pay the workers, the diesel for the boat, and so on would be deducted. In total, the investment in the fish farm would be about $30 million. If they were lucky, they would be able to recoup their investment in 3 years, and at least be stable in the 4th year. Almost half of the annual income could be earned. Of course, this half of the income would be taxed. But at least before they recouped their investment, they didn't have to worry about taxes. This was also one of the benefits of the United States. For these farmers and fishermen, they only collected the money they earned and not the money they earned back. According to Edward Anderson's calculations, Jiang Hai still had the money to invest. After all, the money didn't need to be invested all at once. Secondly, Ai Dehua had also recently investigated the underwater situation of Jiang Hai's fish farm. He found that there were definitely a lot of fish under the water. After 10 years of recuperation, Jiang Hai's underwater ecosystem was extremely perfect. The number of fish was considerable. Even though it was winter, there were still a lot of fish under the water. According to Ai Dehua's preliminary estimate, there were about $10 million worth of fish in the water. Of course, this was under the condition that they were all fished out. With $10 million, not to mention supporting the income of the fish farm for the first year, it was enough for Jiang Hai to even pay for all the buildings. According to Edward Anderson, there was nothing wrong with doing this, but Jiang Hai was a little unwilling to accept it. He had always thought that since he was also raising fish and he had a cheat, why couldn't he raise some shiny fish? That was why he went to the market and Wuxia restaurant to inquire about the situation. Of course, in addition to these things, there were also some very valuable things, but Jiang Hai didn't think of raising them, at least not now. The most famous of them were sea cucumbers and abalones. It was because these two things didn't have much of a market in the United States. Although the market in China was just right, just like the fishermen in the Atlantic region, they knew that the price of the same thing would double if they were to send it to Wuxia. This was a problem. Some of the top goods could be transported by air, but what about the comprehensive trade? All of them by air? That was bullshit. After being frozen at ultra-low temperatures and then thawed, the taste would be different, and they wouldn't be able to be sold at a high price at all. As for the frozen ones, they could only be kept fresh for 12 days. They would be caught on the first day and delivered on the second day. If they went by sea, they could cross the Atlantic Ocean, cross the Indian Ocean, reach the Pacific Ocean, turn a corner, and reach Wuxia without encountering any trouble. 12 days was enough for them. Therefore, although Jiang Hai had the ambition to raise a large number of high-quality fish, everything had to be done slowly. At the very least, he had to prove that he could raise such good things and determine the market before deciding whether to raise them or not. But no matter what he decided to raise, he was determined to raise fry. It was just that the quantity was a problem. At the same time, since he had decided to raise fish, no matter what kind of fish he raised, he had to prepare to start building an ecological circle. So today, Edward Anderson took Jiang Hai to Boston. They were going to raise fish. Not long after they got off the highway, they saw the Celtics North Shore Garden Arena in the distance. Looking at the arena, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think of the trial training that day. It was hilarious. A 10-day contract. Of course, on the third day after that day when they lost to the Nets at home and the Wizards away, Bradley and Brad Stevens came to Jiang Hai's house with a guaranteed annual salary of $1.98 million. They hoped that Jiang Hai would agree to join them. But let alone $1.98 million, even if the annual salary was $19.8 million. Jiang Hai might be tempted, but it's a pity he doesn't have that zero. The difference is still huge. What can't he do that he can't earn $2 million? Furthermore, he still has to pay half of the taxes to the US government, which is only $1 million. Does he lack this amount of money? What a joke. If he has the time, he can go to the sea and make more than this amount. So, in the end, Jiang Hai did not agree. The two of them expressed their helplessness, but they said that they will not give up. Jiang Hai doesn't care if they will give up because it will be New Year's Eve soon. In the United States, there was nothing good about the New Year. It wasn't as interesting as Christmas. The major competitions didn't give off the feeling of being the focus of attention. Only some TV stations would do some New Year's Eve concerts. If Jiang Hai was in New York, he could go to Times Square to watch the concert and then pick up some girls. Maybe he could even get a kiss at the end of the new year. But obviously he doesn't have the mood to go. So he spent New Year's Eve alone at home. With the arrival of January, the coldest time of the year had arrived in the Boston area. After Belle returned, Robbins and the others had to end their vacation in advance and start to get busy. As for John and Louis, after the new year, they returned to the place where they should go. Although Jiang Hai's manner was very fun, after all, they still had their own things to think about. At the same time, Ai Dehua and Jiang Hai also have something to do. They need to buy water plants. The basic structure of the ecological food chain is that big fish eat small fish eat shrimps, and shrimps eat water plants. In Boston, unless you raise strange fish, you have to put in the fry at the beginning of spring, which is March. The fry need to eat when they go into the sea. Of course, they can be fed at a fixed location, but they also need to hide to avoid being eaten by big fish. So, when the fry are put in, the ecological environment must be built. Water plants, as the most basic part of the food chain, need to be put in first. When the water plants grow for about a month, you will start to put in shrimp, crab, shell, and so on. After these seedlings grow for another month, you will start to put in the fry. However, because the sea is still cold in March, you need to put in a bigger body when you put in the fry. Too small larvae will not do. These are all things to pay attention to. In the past, Jiang Hai was not very clear about it. He has to admit that you are never too old to learn. When Jiang Hai was thinking about what to raise in his heart, the car slowly drove into the port in the center of Boston where Jiang Hai had been before. But this time it went in another direction. Jiang Hai saw a large number of grid boxes from afar. This is the wholesale market of Boston's fry. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 108. Hi Ai Dehua here. This area was not the territory of a fish seedling wholesaler, but almost 90% of Boston's fish seedling wholesalers were concentrated there. Ai Dehua had been dealing with ships for most of his life, so he was naturally very familiar with this place. Before he came, he had already called to contact people, so after driving in he didn't pay attention to the people outside who were waving and asking questions, but he drove straight inside. After about 3 minutes, a black man appeared in front of Jiang Hai's F-750 and waved at Ai Dehua with a happy face. Ai Dehua turned the steering wheel and stopped in front of him. As the two opened the door and jumped out, Ai Dehua and the big man on the other side couldn't help but hug each other, showing a brotherly love. Boss, let me introduce you. This is Iron Bull, Porter, and Eva, my good brother. We went out to sea together on a fishing boat to catch sperm whales. He is the largest private fish seedling wholesaler here. Iron Bull, this is my current boss from the mysterious East, Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang. After hugging the big black man, Ai Dehua introduced him to the two with excitement. Hearing Ai Dehua's introduction, the big man named Porter and Eva reached out his hand first. Hello, Mr. Jiang, you can call me Iron Bull. After shaking hands with him, Jiang Hai also nodded with a chuckle. Jiang Hai was also looking at this guy. He is more than 1.9 meters tall, bald and shiny black skin. Although it is winter now, he is not wearing too much. His huge size makes people feel scared. It is not bad to be called Iron Bull. AI Dehua had already told Jiang Hai about this person's origin on the way here. This black man used to be a crew member with AI Dehua in California, but he was younger than AI Dehua. Later, after the two made money, AI Dehua came back to retire, and he opened a fish seedling company in Boston. Perhaps because they were black, they were discriminated against in the beginning. However, later on, they relied on their strong means and the fact that they were really good seedlings that allowed them to gain a foothold here. After all, in a capitalist society, those rich people were more concerned about whether you could bring them wealth, not the color of your skin. When there was a conflict between racial feelings and US dollars, the US dollars were often more powerful. Although I don't dare to say that my place is the largest in Massachusetts, I definitely have the most complete variety here. AI Dehua has already told me your purpose for coming here. Since you want to choose grass seeds, you need to order the fish first because different fish eat different bait, and different bait naturally eat different seaweed. After being polite with Jiang Hai, Iron Bull led Jiang Hai and the others into the room behind him. I have a very complete set of fish seedlings here. I have almost every type of fish that can be farmed here. There are a few boxes of Atlantic cod here. Although you don't plan to raise this kind of fish, I still have to say that this kind of fish is actually the easiest to earn. Moreover, it's almost guaranteed that you won't lose money. Iron Bull introduced to Jiang Hai as he walked into the grid area behind him. The price of the cod seedlings here was really not expensive. It was about 13 cents per tail. According to the calculation, a mature fish could be sold for $1.75, which was almost a dozen times the profit. After deducting the labor cost and the cost of the bait, one could earn about 90 cents per fish for a year. 1 million fish would be $900,000 and 10 million fish would be $9 million. Raising this kind of fish could indeed make a profit without making a loss, but in Jiang Hai's view, the scope was too small and not suitable for him to develop. This is a herring. It's a type of fish that can be raised with cod, but it doesn't grow big. It's like a gift from Santa Claus. It's a surprise no matter how many there are. After walking past the most cod ponds, they arrived at the bottom ponds. The herring seedlings in the ponds were smaller than the cod. After all, the fish itself did not grow very big. The largest was about 30 centimeters. Unlike cod, which could live for a long time and grow big, this kind of fish was basically a set with cod. When raising cod, they would more or less raise some herring. The economic value of this kind of fish was similar to that of cod. It could be sold for money or it could be used as rations for cod. Of course, the most important thing was that its sales were large and there was no need to worry about sales at all. The price of this kind of fish was 8 cents per tail. After all, it could also be used as rations, so it was not expensive. This is the Maine lobster pond and this is the emperor crab pond. I specially imported them from Asian island countries, but they are not very easy to raise. This is the bamboo shrimp, which came with this kind of crab. Although the taste is good and the price is good, it is also not very easy to raise. This is the oyster pond. I have almost all the oysters in the world here. This is the high prestige oyster, produced in Ireland. This is the king of oysters, the Ghidorah oyster. This is the best oyster. If it grows well, it can be sold for $20 in a Western restaurant. I heard that they will sell it for about $10. These damn Western restaurants. After walking through the cod and herring pond, Jiang Hai saw a crustacean purse net in front of him. The things in the purse net made Jiang Hai's eyes light up. Needless to say, the Maine lobster was a representative species of Maine and the Boston area. Although the local price was not high, Jiang Hai had always wanted to raise them. It was just that he had not dived into the water these days, so Jiang Hai was not sure if his territory was suitable for raising these things. If it was suitable, he would raise a few. Although eating lobster was despised by others in China and was said to be a nouveau riche, Jiang Hai was now a nouveau riche, so he wanted to eat them. In addition to the lobster, he also saw other valuable things that he had investigated, such as the emperor crab. The emperor crab and the emperor crab were not the same kind of crab. The emperor crab actually referred to the Kanshaka stone crab, which belonged to the stone crab family. The emperor crab's scientific name was the giant pseudoliteral crab, which belonged to the crab family. It was easy to distinguish from its appearance. The emperor crab was a spider crab, a killer crab, the kind with particularly long legs. It looked more like a spider than a crab. The emperor crab, on the other hand, was an enlarged crab. It was very big, quite big. People in Europe and America would not eat the killer crab, but they liked the emperor crab very much. However, the price of this guy was also very good. The average price of 1 kilogram was about $100, and a grown emperor crab weighed at least 10 kilograms. In other words, one crab could be sold for more than $1,000, and this was when it was bought raw. If it was cooked in a Western restaurant, it would be even more expensive. And this kind of crab was so expensive that it could be ignored. Many seafood restaurants did not dare to buy it. They were afraid that it would die after being raised in the restaurant, or that no one would order it. After all, one crab could cost tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. In the current situation in China, without people with 2 mouths to feed, there were not many people who could afford to eat it. Although the bamboo shrimp was not as expensive as the spotted shrimp, if it was raised, 1 kilogram could be sold for about $20. Among the seafood, it was a pretty good price. Of course, the most expensive clam was the geoduck clam, which was also available here. As for the oysters, which were very popular in Europe and America, Jiang Hai was a little confused. This was because he also ate oysters in China. However, oysters should be very cheap. The smaller restaurants in China or in the night market sold oysters for $1, $2 each. He really could not understand why an oyster could be sold for $20. Was it robbery? In addition to these things, there were many other kinds of shellfish here. These were also the fish food that Jiang Hai wanted to buy in the future. There were all kinds of clams, and clams. Well, it was not called that in the United States. But the things here were the same. Along the way, Jiang Hai also looked at the things here. The things here were indeed very complete, and there were even abalones. However, for things like abalones, ordinary small abalones were not worth much. They were sold in the domestic seafood market for a few dozen per kilogram. The bigger ones were sold in some seaside cities for more than $10 per abalone. Those truly precious abalones were top-notch. The so-called top-notch did not refer to how many heads the abalones had, but how many abalones there were in a caddy. The so-called two-headed abalones meant that 2 abalones weighed a caddy. The price of such abalones could be imagined. The 3-headed abalones were much cheaper than the 2-headed abalones. The abalones that cost dozens of yuan per caddy were estimated to have more than 10 heads. The abalones that cost more than 10 yuan per caddy were estimated to have 7 or 8 heads. Such abalones were not worth much. After walking past these valuable shellfish, they arrived in front of the fish grid. But obviously the fish here were much better than cod and herring. Iron Bull also stopped here and introduced them to Jiang Hai. This fish is much better in the south because it is too cold here. This is a 3-year-old fish. Nominally, it can be directly thrown into the sea, but in fact, it still needs to be raised for a period of time. I heard from AI Dehua that there is no fresh water source in our country, so this fish is not easy to raise. If you want to raise them directly, I recommend these 3 kinds of fish: grouper, giant grouper, and American redfish. Iron Bull looked at Jiang Hai and said seriously. In fact, there were many types of grouper, but if it was just called grouper, it would be tiger grouper because the tiger grouper was the real grouper. The giant grouper was also called dragon grouper in China, and its price was almost the same as grouper, but its size was much larger. Finally, the American redfish was also a fish that Jiang Hai cared about after all. So basically, it needs to be raised for 2 years to sell. The price is about the same, about $30 per kilogram. But the survival rate of this fish is very low. Not only does nature eliminate some of them, but they also kill each other. They need to eat constantly, and the cost is also very high. The survival rate of the fry is less than 40%. Of course, I'm talking about wild breeding. If it is in a cage, it will be relatively higher. Looking at Jiang Hai, Iron Bull slowly introduced. Looking at the grid he pointed at, Jiang Hai hesitated. Today's first update, 2 consecutive updates. Sure enough, after returning to the main plot, the book review section was much calmer. Happy ha. Chapter 109. Logically speaking, it was the most profitable way to raise a fish. A young fish cost $1.15. After 2 years, the cost of a fish was about $50. If it grew to 15 kilograms, it would cost $30 per kilogram, which would be $450 per fish. It seemed like a 9-fold increase, but one fish could earn $400. 100 fish was $40,000, and 1,000,000 fish was $400 million. But to raise 1,000,000 fish based on the survival rate, one would have to buy 3 million fish seedlings. The cost of a seedling was $50, so in total, it would be $150 million. Someone said that it was still very profitable. What if it was $250 million? But it had to be understood that there might be natural or man-made disasters. For example, what if there was a tsunami? Boston was so prone to typhoons. If there was a tsunami, an earthquake, or an oil pipeline in the Pacific Ocean that happened to blow up and hit Jianghai's fish farm, the American government would compensate a part of it, but that was only a part. In the end, Jianghai would still lose everything. This was also why most fishermen in North America were willing to raise cod and herring even though they knew that raising these expensive fish could make money. At least those things were guaranteed. Even if they were to fail this year, there would still be subsidies from the American government so they would not lose too much. Therefore, people who were willing to take the risk to raise these kinds of fish were also rare in the United States. Basically, if they wanted to raise these kinds of fish, they would only raise them in a small area. No one was willing to raise them in a large area. As for the rest of the bream, I won't recommend them to you because these fish are solitary, and it's not easy for you to catch them. Finally, this is the American redfish. This fish has just become popular in recent years, and I heard that it's very popular in China. The price per kilogram of adult fish is about $12, but the price for juvenile fish is 20 cents, which is about the same as codfish, but much more expensive than codfish. It's also easier to raise and grows faster. The biggest fish can grow up to 3 kilograms in a year, and the smallest fish can grow up to more than 1 kilogram. The only troublesome thing is that they eat a lot and are prone to diseases, so they have a high demand for seawater. After introducing the grouper and anchovy, Iron Bull focused on introducing this kind of fish to Jianghai. This kind of fish was also farmed in China. Therefore, Jianghai had some understanding of this fish. Its appearance was similar to yellow croakers and its taste was similar. After all, they were of the same genus, the grouper family. They were considered distant relatives. In the United States and Mexico, this kind of fish was the favorite fish of sea fishermen. It tasted good and was not too fishy, but it was rich in nutrients. It was a very good fish. Recently, this kind of fish was popular in China. Therefore, in the United States, this kind of fish did not have to worry about sales. Most importantly, this kind of fish was easier to raise and the seedlings were cheap. If there was no problem with the water in the fish farm and they did not get sick, the cost of raising a fish was about $2. 1 kilogram was $12. According to raising it for a year, an average of 2 kilograms would be $24. One fish could earn $22. 1 million fish would be $22 million. The survival rate was much higher than the grouper. This kind of fish liked to eat its own kind. This kind of fish did not have such a habit. As long as there was enough food, there would not be a big problem, so when Jianghai heard this, he was also a little biased towards this kind of fish. Can you raise it together? But it was just a suggestion. Jianghai hesitated for a moment and asked him. Hearing Jianghai's words, Iron Bull couldn't help but be stunned. Raise it together? Boss, have you really decided? Getting in the car, Ai Dehua looked at Jianghai and couldn't help but ask hesitantly. Yes, it's decided, so happily. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jianghai also smiled and said to him. Well, you're the boss. I've never raised a fish like this before. With a helpless sigh, Ai Dehua said inexplicably, because in the end, Jianghai still decided to raise them together. He wanted to raise 3 million American redfish, 200,000 grouper and 200,000 giant grouper, and finally add 50,000 salmon. In addition to these things, he also raised other things such as king crab. This kind of seedling is sold by the ton, $500,000 per ton. Well, Jianghai bought a ton of them, $300,000 per ton. Maine lobster is the cheapest, $20,000 per ton. Jianghai bought 10 tons at one time and prepared to throw them into his ocean together with Haiyu. Fortunately, his fishery was big enough. Otherwise, these things alone would be enough to make the fishery a mess. Jianghai didn't want to waste any more time. Instead, he bought 10 tons of them. Just the money for these seedlings added up to a very considerable income. The American king snapper was 20 cents per fish, so 3 million fish would be $600,000. The grouper was $1 per fish, so a total of 200,000 fish would be $200,000. The anaconda was $1 per fish, so a total of $230,000 would be $200,000. The anaconda was 15 cents per fish, so a total of $230,000 would be $230,000. The king crab was $5 per fish, so 50,000 fish would be $250,000 per fish. Adding the king crab's $500,000, the spotted shrimp's $300,000, and the Maine lobster's $200,000. With just a wave of Jianghai's hand, he spent $28 million on these seedlings alone. Someone said, Didn't they say to build an ecological environment first and then buy fish? Such a large-scale purchase of seedlings. Of course, it is impossible that there is no time to prepare. Originally, according to Iron Bull, Jiang Hai will give him a deposit first, and then he will prepare the seedlings. However, Jiang Hai was too lazy to talk nonsense. Since Ai Dehua said that this person is trustworthy, Jiang Hai directly signed the contract, and then Jiang Hai transferred all the money. Faced with Jiang Hai's tycoon style, Iron Bull was about to go crazy with joy. He had never met such a big customer before. With this deal, apart from the transportation, labor, and the original cost of the seedlings, he can earn at least 300,000 renminbi. This income of 300,000 renminbi is equivalent to several years of selling seedlings. Thinking of this, it would be strange if he was not happy. He immediately patted his chest and promised Jiang Hai that he will bring the best seedlings to Jiang Hai. At the same time, he will give Jiang Hai a ton of lobsters, a ton of bamboo prawns, a ton of top-grade Australian abalone, and 2 tons of Ghidorah oysters for free. According to Jiang Hai's calculation, these things added up to almost 100,000 renminbi. Finally, he will give him 5 tons of Arctic sweet prawns. Jiang Hai has to admit that Jiang Hai is very good at doing business. Just these things made Jiang Hai very happy. If he works harder, Jiang Hai will definitely buy from him in the future. This is because Jiang Hai will not only buy seedlings for a year, he does not plan to cultivate seedlings himself. If he wants to catch a big customer like himself, working hard is the only way out. However, after spending the money, Jiang Hai realized that the real money has not been spent yet. Because they bought too many fish, prawns, and crabs, Jiang Hai's fish farm's original need for food has increased rapidly. With the increase in food, the amount of food, water, and plants also increased rapidly. According to Ai Dehua's calculation, the amount of seaweed seeds was also increasing. Originally, he only needed about 100,000 renminbi of seeds, but now it seems that he has to increase it to 300,000 renminbi. Iron Bull was also in charge of contacting the sea bath company, but the matters of the phone call discussion were left to Ai Dehua and Jiang Hai. When the person on the other side heard that it was a big deal worth 300,000 renminbi, he immediately drove over without hesitation. After the contract was signed, the balance of the 300,000 renminbi of seaweed seeds was paid. The person on the other side of the line laughed like crazy. He said that he would immediately go back and arrange a plane to plant the seeds. Within 3 days he would help Jiang Hai finish planting them. In addition to the sea bath company and the seaweed, Jiang Hai also needed to buy expensive fish, prawns, crabs, and other things to eat. In other words, cuttlefish, mullet, and all kinds of shellfish, which lived at the bottom of the marine food chain. According to Ai Dehua's calculation, it would cost about 2 million renminbi to buy them, and this was only the first batch because these guys were just food. When the little guys in the fish farm grew up, they would naturally have to be fed. According to Ai Dehua, they could put in some bait and so on, which would save a lot of money. However, after some consideration, Jiang Hai felt that it would be better to let the fish hunt for food on their own. After all, Jiang Hai didn't want to feed the fish when they were in a wild state. However, according to what Jiang Hai said, Ai Dehua did some research and found that he needed to put in some fish every 3 months, which was a quarter. The first batch cost 2 million renminbi, and the subsequent batches were about the same. Although the fish were growing up, they were also dying. Therefore, the amount of fish food he put in did not fluctuate too much. Even so, Jiang Hai needed to invest 13 million renminbi in fish food for a year, plus the 3 million renminbi he spent today, it would be 16 million renminbi. This did not include the cost of the boats, the cost of oil, and the tax of the sea farm. If all of these were added together, it would be estimated to be 24 million renminbi. Thinking of this number, Edward Anderson was forced to be serious. According to the standard of 60% of the American red fish, 3 million fish would be 8 million mature fish. If the weather was good and there were no disasters or diseases, it would be 18 million renminbi if he could only earn 10 renminbi per fish. That would be a loss of 6 million renminbi. In other words, he had to earn more than 15 renminbi per fish to be able to recoup his investment. However, he also had to take into account the tax. Although he would receive subsidies later on to make up for most of the loss, he would still have to pay for it in the early stages. If it was not like what Iron Bull said, where he could earn 20 renminbi per fish when they were in their best condition, he might not be able to recoup his investment even after a year of good weather. Thinking of this, he could not help but shudder. No, I have to find a way to get the boss to recoup some money first. Otherwise, when the time comes, it will be really troublesome. Ai Dehua looked at the heartless Jiang Hai beside him and whispered in his heart. "Boss, let's go fishing tomorrow?" In the end, as if he had made up his mind about something, Edward Anderson turned his head and looked at Jiang Hai beside him. Hearing this, Jiang Hai could not help but be stunned. "Fishing? Eh?" Looking at Ai Dehua's serious face, Jiang Hai's eyes began to shine. "Fishing seems like a good idea." Today's second update, continuously delivered. Recently, I've been looking at the crown princess. She seems to be poisoned. *CK, I'm not that gay. Ahem, okay, the female lead is indeed quite beautiful. Chapter 110. Boss, you can't always rely on me. If you really want to develop the ocean, then it's time to recruit people. Standing on Jiang Hai's specially installed fishing boat, Philip said to Jiang Hai with a depressed face. His real identity is a cowboy, but he is always called a crew member by Jiang Hai. This is not a good thing because he hates the sea. Well, I know. I'm in a hurry today. I'll go recruit in 2 days. While fixing the fishing net according to Edward Anderson's instructions, Jiang Hai smiled and said to Philip, who was complaining, "Let's hope so." Philip said helplessly as he patted his forehead. Originally, according to Edward Anderson's calculation, Jiang Hai shouldn't spend too much money to buy fish seedlings. After all, he only planned to buy codfish at first. Later, when Jiang Hai said that he wanted to raise valuable fish, he naively thought that he was going to raise American redfish. But who knew that after he went there, Jiang Hai's extravagant character instantly occupied the main position. In addition to raising American redfish, he also raised grouper, longzhu and 4-year-old salmon? If it's just these, then it's fine, but what the hell is that king crab and spotted shrimp? And lobsters? Thinking of this, Edward Anderson's heart faintly ached. If the fish he raised this time really lost all his money, then Jiang Hai would be in trouble. Fortunately, there were a lot of fish in the original fishery. According to Edward Anderson's research, if all the fish and shrimps in the fishery were caught, it would be about $8 million. Of course, Jiang Hai wouldn't really let him catch all of them. Maintaining the marine ecosystem didn't just rely on the fish raised by Jiang Hai. However, catching some to subsidize the family was indispensable. At the same time, catching fish like this also left room for new fish seedlings to survive. After all, after 10 years of development, the fish in Jiang Hai's fishery was almost full. If he didn't catch some, when it was time to put in the aquatic plants and fish seedlings, those things wouldn't be enough for the playthings underwater. Therefore, after buying the fish seedlings and aquatic plants yesterday, Jiang Hai went home and prepared for the night. The next morning, Ai Dehua took him and Philemon, who was forcibly taken from the cowshed by Ai Dehua, out to sea on a fishing boat. Ai Dehua was indeed a top fisherman. The fishing boat he assembled wasn't small, and it was very good. Although it wasn't big, it ran fast on the sea and didn't sway. Jiang Hai liked it very much. At the same time, the most important thing was that there were many rooms here, and the decorations inside were very good. It could be foreseen that even if they went out to sea to fish in the future, it wouldn't be too difficult. At this time, although the 3 people on the boat were on the same boat, their moods were different. Jiang Hai was excited because this was the first time he went out to sea to fish. The last time he came to look for fish, it couldn't be counted as fishing. Ai Dehua was a little anxious. He was eager to earn back the first sum of money for his boss. As for Philemon, well, he didn't have any other thoughts besides muttering there. Bang! However, just as Philip was happily muttering to himself, there was a sudden explosion. On the calm sea surface, a huge figure suddenly appeared. The sea water instantly collapsed onto the boat, drenching Jiang Hai and Philip. Fortunately, the 2 of them had already changed into waterproof fishermen's clothes, otherwise, they would have been drenched like a drowned rat. Shark, shark. The explosion here attracted the attention of Jiang Hai and Philemon. In Philemon's eyes, a huge shark directly jumped out of the water, jumped straight to the sea surface, and then fell heavily into the water. Then it swam towards the side of the fishing boat while wagging its tail. This shark seemed to be about 4 meters long. Of course, compared to the fishing boat which was dozens of meters long, it was still small. But compared to humans, it was already twice as tall. Seeing the shark swimming close to the fishing boat, Philemon couldn't help but frown. 4 fishermen having a shark following them wasn't good news, because sharks were also hunting fish. If his fishing boat put a net here, then the shark might eat some of the fish. Of course, it would be fine if it only ate some of the fish. The most frightening thing was that the shark would break through the school of fish. At that time, they wouldn't be able to catch any fish, which would affect the harvest. At the same time, the fishing net might also entangle the shark. If it was an ordinary reef shark they might not care too much, but such a big shark could easily break the fishing net. One must know that a cheap fishing net would cost tens of thousands of dollars, and the expensive ones would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Therefore, for regular fishermen, sharks, especially large sharks, were not a good thing. Of course, catching sharks in the open sea and getting shark fins was another matter. It's okay, don't you recognize it? It's the tiger shark that I raised. However, compared to Philemon's surprise, Jiang Hai was a lot calmer. Lying on the boat's bow and looking at the shark swimming below, Jiang Hai recognized it at a glance. It was the shark that he raised. He hadn't seen it for a while and it seemed to have grown up in the sea. The effect of Jiang Hai's dragon blood wasn't ordinary. It was precisely because of the dragon blood that this shark sensed Jiang Hai's position as soon as Jiang Hai entered the sea. It quickly swam over just like a kitten or a puppy playing there. Seeing the shark's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk to the boat's bow and pat the shark's head. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Philemon was stunned. He had heard of raising dolphins and orcas, but what the hell was raising sharks? One must know that sharks were very stupid. They were cold-blooded and didn't recognize people. They didn't have domesticated DNA stored in their bodies. Therefore almost no one raised them. Even if someone raised them, it would be impossible to pat their head. Originally, Philemon wanted to remind Jiang Hai. But when he saw the shark turn over in front of Jiang Hai, he became confused. F***CK, is this a shark or a dog? Don't you know that you can't feel anything when you turn over? Although it felt strange, even if the shark was stupid, at least it showed that it wasn't hostile to Jiang Hai. And Jiang Hai didn't let it turn over for too long and directly turned it back. Go under the sea and drive some fish into our fishing net. Patting the sand tiger shark's head, Jiang Hai said with a smile. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the sand tiger shark shook its head and then drilled into the water, disappearing. Boss, you don't really think that it will help drive the fish away, do you? Obviously, Philemon also heard what Jiang Hai said to the sand tiger shark. When Jiang Hai returned to the deck, Philemon couldn't help but laugh. Who knows? Jiang Hai shrugged. He couldn't really say that he had the ability to communicate with animals. Of course, it was with animals that had absorbed his blood. In this way, the fishing boat sailed for about 5 minutes before AI Dehua's voice came from the cabin. Release the net. Hearing AI Dehua's voice, Philemon immediately controlled the machine and released the fishing net from the back into the water. Fishing nets were used for different purposes, so naturally they were made of different materials. In terms of usage, fishing nets can be divided into gill net, trawl net, purse seine net, net building net, and net spreading net. Different uses naturally lead to different materials. For example, the trawl net used by Jiang Hai was made of steel wire, nylon rope, and glass steel wire. Although the weight was reduced because of the addition of fiberglass, this net was still calculated by tons. This was not something that can be handled by human strength. Therefore, it must be controlled by a machine. There were 2 devices to control this machine. One was in the control room, which can be directly controlled from the control room, and the other was on the deck. Although Philip didn't know much about sailing, he was still very familiar with the operation of the net. With his skills, it didn't take long for the net to spread out behind Jiang Hai's fishing boat. Not long after the net spread out, Jiang Hai felt that the speed of the fishing boat suddenly decreased a bit. In the gaps of the net, Jiang Hai could see some fish jumping out of the water. Boss, I have to admit that you have a lot of fish in your fishery. Although the net hadn't been released yet, Philemon could see it clearly. Jiang Hai did have a lot of fish. He originally thought that AI Dehua was just joking when he said that there were tens of millions of fish here. But he didn't expect that this estimate was still conservative. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai also smiled happily. He was lying on the boat's bow looking at the fish net below. What's caught here weren't fish but green franklins. After about an hour, Edward Anderson's voice came from the deck again, asking Jiang Hai and Philemon to pull up the net. Philemon didn't say anything and immediately went to operate the machine. As the ship slowed down, the net was gradually lifted out of the water by Philemon. Jiang Hai's net was a large one, and the gap between the net was 15 centimeters. In other words, almost all the fish below 30 centimeters would escape through the gap. But when the net was lifted, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh," because the tightened net in front of him was like a huge ball. The fish were squeezed into the middle of the net, which had a diameter of 4 to 5 meters. Jiang Hai really didn't catch fish but franklins. I'm here to recommend it. I'll push it to the shelves next week. Please support and collect it. It's my first time writing a farming story, so I'm very nervous. Chapter 111. 11.5 tons, that's about 30,000 fish. And this is just the fish from the upper level. If we catch more fish from the lower level, there should be more. Looking at the numbers displayed on the hydraulic screen, Philip couldn't help but smile. Then he controlled the robot arm to pull the fishing net into the empty fish pond. But at this time there was no water in the pond. This was because the fish needed to be sorted. Some of the fish were very valuable while some weren't. Naturally, their fates were different. After Philip put the 11 tons of fish into the pond, AI Dehua came out of the cockpit and followed Jiang Hai and Philip into the fish pond. Now they needed to sort out the fish, put some valuable fish into the pool next to them, and throw away or kill some inedible things such as water plants, jellyfish, sea snakes and so on which they had caught. Then they need to release some things back into the sea such as turtles, sharks, seals, sea lions, fur seals, dolphins and so on. These creatures, other than those who were targeted and killed by crazy people, were basically not targeted by ordinary fishing boats. According to Philemon, they wouldn't catch too many strange things in the upper layer of the fish. Sure enough, after the net was opened, in addition to aquatic plants, most of the fish were fish. There were all kinds of fish. The most conspicuous ones were a few huge red fish. These fish had sharp spikes on their bodies, making them look very scary. When AI Dehua and Philip saw these fish, they immediately ran over and grabbed them by the gills before throwing them into the pond. What kind of fish are these? They look very festive. Jiang Hai then joined them. Holding a fish, Jiang Hai asked Philip. He was indeed very curious. This is the vermilion sebastes, a very valuable fish that can grow up to 1 meter. It originally lived in the Pacific Canada region, but later on the Newfoundland fishery planted it directly, so we have it here. The price of this fish is very high. Not only can it be eaten, but it can also be raised as an ornamental fish. The one in your hand can be sold for about $2,000. Hearing Philip's introduction, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. A fish can be sold for $2,000? That's a big profit. But he was actually thinking too much. It would take 6 or 7 years for the fish to grow to the size of the one in Jiang Hai's hand. It's possible to raise this kind of fish to make money, but it's difficult to make a lot of money in batches. After knowing that the fish in his hand was so valuable, Jiang Hai became more careful and put the fish back into the pond. After putting the fish in the pond, Jiang Hai caught another red fish and was about to put it in the pond, but he was stopped by Philip. This kind of fish is the vermilion sebastes. It's valuable. The one you caught is a sea bass. It's not valuable. This kind of fish is also called Norway cod. It's a little more expensive than cod. It's not worth putting in. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. To be honest, it was really difficult for him to distinguish the difference between these fish. Then Jiang Hai discovered that there were a lot of small red fishes among the fishes that they caught. But this time he decided to ask Philip about these fishes before doing anything else. This is the golden eye snapper. It's also a fish from the Pacific Ocean, but someone raised it here. It's probably to reproduce. This fish is also very valuable. The people in Japan like it very much. This is the redfin snapper. It's not valuable. This is the big eye snapper. It's okay, but just throw it here. We'll sort it later. Jiang Hai asked while picking. Then he found that the fish were really not ordinary. In his opinion, all the fish looked the same, but there were several or even more than a dozen different classifications. And this was just the red ones. If you look at the normal color, it would be even more chaotic. There were sebastes, black-banded sebastes, black-eyed sebastes, filed sebastes. At least, Jiang Hai couldn't tell them apart. Just the above 3 kinds of fish, the price difference was like heaven and earth. The price of the black-banded sebastes was the lowest, about $6 per kilogram, while the black-eyed sebastes could be sold for $11. The difference between the two was $5. If Jiang Hai and the other fishermen didn't distinguish the fish clearly, the fish merchants wouldn't give them a share. They would treat them as black-banded sebastes. At that time, the fisherman, that is, the owner of the fish farm Jiang Hai, would be the losers. 11.5 tons of fish, excluding kelp and water. There were about 10 tons of fish, nearly 30,000 fish. 30,000 fish seemed to be a lot, but in the hands of these professional fishermen, it was actually quite easy to sort them out. It took a little time to sort out the expensive fish, but it only took 1 or 2 seconds to sort out the less expensive fish. Therefore, about 2 hours later, they threw the useless sea snakes back into the sea and killed the jellyfish directly. In the absence of sea turtles, fur seals, sea lions and other creatures to be released, AI Dehua and Philip had already finished counting all the fish. This kind of work was a piece of cake for them. Let's take a break and then cast the second net. Seeing that the fish were all ready and it was still early, Edward Anderson took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, lit two by himself and handed one to Philip. Then he sat there and rested. Because they knew that Jiang Hai didn't smoke, they didn't give it to Jiang Hai. In fact, Jiang Hai had smoked a long time ago, probably when he was in junior high school. However, his family conditions didn't allow it, and he found that smoking wasn't addictive after a few years, so he quit. Although his financial conditions allowed it now, he didn't intend to pick it up again. It was good that he didn't smoke. "Come, boss, let me introduce you to the fish we caught." Seeing that they were smoking while Jiang Hai, the boss, didn't do anything, Philip came over with a smile and introduced the fish to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai is the boss of a fishery. If he doesn't know what kind of fish it is, then it would be a bit strange. Speaking of which, he has been interested in these fish for a long time. When he heard Philip's words, he also went to the fish pond. "This is codfish, this is herring, and this is sea bass, the greediest fish in the sea, but it's also the easiest to catch. These are the ones I introduced just now: vermilion sebastes, lambreme, black-striped sebastes, black-eyed sebastes, red sebastes, golden-eye sebastes, filehead sebastes, silver rock bass, brown trout. You've seen before. It's a migratory fish. This is Atlantic salmon, just like trout. I guess this fish is about to produce seeds." Philip stood beside the fish pond and introduced more than 10 kinds of fish to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai really couldn't tell them apart, so he could only memorize them. He had to admit that being a fisherman required a lot of experience and vision, especially in a fishery like Jiang Hai's. After all, this fishery hadn't been fished for several years. Because he had never fished before, the fish in the fish farm here was very mixed, unlike those farmed fish farms. If one's vision wasn't good enough, they would really pick the worst ones. At this time, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel lucky that he asked Ai de Hua for help. "I know this fish, lionfish." After introducing all the fishes that looked similar, Jiang Hai saw a few that looked different. These fishes had long spikes on their bodies. He remembered that he knew these fishes. They looked very flowery and had hard spikes on their bodies. He had seen them on TV before. This is sea bream." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip hesitated for a moment and decided to tell Jiang Hai the truth. Almost the same." Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. He took a closer look and found that they looked almost the same. Far from it. The scientific name of lionfish is sebastes. It belongs to the Scorpionidae family, just like the scarlet sebastes and black sebastes over there. The sea bream belongs to the sea bream family. Most importantly, lionfish is a harmful fish. Because of its toxicity, not many people like to eat it, so the price is much lower. We don't have lionfish here. It's a fish from the Pacific Ocean. We have sea bream here, so the price is very high." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip smiled and said. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai smiled a little awkwardly. It seems that his knowledge is really not enough. "Okay, that's about it. Let's set the net again and then we'll sell them. This time let's set the net deeper." Hearing that Philip had almost finished introducing the fish, Ai de Hua stood up and threw the cigarette butt into the trash can that was already prepared on the side of the ship. Then he returned to the cabin. As for Jiang Hai and Philip, they stayed on the deck and pushed the precious fish into a separate room next to them. The room was specially made to be humid. Inside the room, there was a sink that was specially made to store live seafood. Seafood was best when it was still alive. No matter how fresh it wasn't as delicious as live ones. Naturally, there was no live ones that could be sold at a high price. Of course, things like tuna would die once it left the water. As for the rest, the less valuable ones were pushed into the cold storage. There was also a layer of water here, but with so many fish squeezed together, they would naturally live if they could, and die if they couldn't, as long as they were still fresh when they were sent to the fish merchant. After everything was ready, Edward Anderson's voice was heard from the loudspeaker. Obviously, he had seen the existence of the fish through the sonar. Philip immediately manipulated the crane to put the fishing net into the water, but this time, the rope was longer. The fish they caught just now were from the upper layer, about 5 to 20 meters above the sea level. This time their net was deeper. They wanted to catch fish between 20 to 30 meters. At this time, they were still on the continental shelf. 30 meters deep meant that they had already dragged the fish to the bottom of the sea. This time they would catch more fish. The reason why they didn't choose to go this deep was that there were reefs in the area just now, but there weren't any in this area. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 112. Wow, it's much more than I expected. Looking at the constantly changing pressure data on the fishing net, Philip couldn't help but whisper. If the fishing net just now was sold, it could probably be sold for about $50,000. Of course, this trip to the sea, the diesel cost $20,000 plus the loss of the fishing boat, the loss of the fishing net, and so on. Adding it all together, the profit of this trip was only about $10,000. Plus the salary of the crew, there wasn't much left. Of course, this refers to the total income of this much. However, it was obvious that Jiang Hai's fishing area had more than just this amount of fish. If other fishermen knew about this, they would probably be overjoyed. Now that they had caught a second net of fish, they would make a pure profit. They would make as much profit as they could get. Now that they had caught a second net of fish, they would earn as much as they could get. The pressure is too much. Do you need to slow down? Looking at the reading on the fishing net getting higher and higher, Philip picked up the walkie-talkie and said to Ai Dehua in the cabin. Hearing Philip's words, Ai Dehua quickly replied, "No need. Do you think the boss's boat is the same as our boat? Everything on this boat is the best, including the fishing net. Even a normal nylon fishing net can withstand this pressure, let alone ours. It's okay, but you have to pay attention. Call me when the reading reaches 300 feet per square meter." Listening to Ai Dehua's words, Philip couldn't help but be stunned. Although he knew that Jiang Hai was willing to spend money, to be honest, he still wanted to be a cowboy, so he didn't go with him when he loaded the boat. Now that he heard his brother-in-law's words, he was relieved. "I'll go to the cabin to get a cup of coffee, do you want it?" After learning that there was nothing here for the time being, Jiang Hai stood in the cold, then knocked on the window of the console next to him and said to Philip. It was only the beginning of January, the coldest time in Boston. Although Jiang Hai was born in the Northeast, and the temperature was much colder than here, he still couldn't withstand the sea breeze. He wasn't like Philip. Perhaps for the convenience of operation, there was a special room at the console with a separate heater and glass that could be used to block the wind. Jiang Hai stood directly in the cold wind. Even with his physical fitness, he still couldn't withstand it. After confirming that there was nothing to worry about for the time being, he decided to go back and make some coffee to drink, even though he didn't like to drink coffee. But this thing does have the effect of warming the stomach. "Oh, give me a cup too, thank you, boss." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip chuckled. Then Jiang Hai walked into the cabin. Jiang Hai's fishing boat was just like what he said when it was built. Although it looked like a fishing boat from the interior decoration, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a yacht. In the beginning, that person took a lot of money from Jiang Hai, and it seemed that he was quite serious. The fishing boat had been sent here for a while, and when it was just sent back, Jiang Hai went on board to take a look, so he was still very clear about the structure of the fishing boat. The entire fishing boat was divided into 2 floors. The first floor was the living area. The driver's cabin was at the front, and behind it was a large living room. The living room was about 30 square meters. There were sofas on both sides, a coffee table in the middle, a bar, a TV, and a refrigerator. The interior was decorated with wood and leather sofas, which made people feel very comfortable. Behind the living room was the living area. There were a total of 8 rooms and a master bedroom. Although it wasn't as luxurious as Jiang Hai's villa, it wasn't too bad. The room had a big bed, carpet, TV, refrigerator, sofa, wardrobe, and so on. There was even a separate bathroom and a separate toilet. Among the other 7 rooms, there were 3 master rooms. Although the decoration inside wasn't as good as the master bedroom, it wasn't too bad. The 3 master rooms also had a separate TV, wardrobe, but they were all one size smaller. The remaining 4 rooms were designed as a double room according to Ai Dehua's original request. 2 beds were directly welded to the wall. Then there was a separate toilet, wardrobe, table, chair, and TV in the room. According to Edward Anderson, these 4 rooms were prepared for him and the future crew. The master bedroom was naturally for Jiang Hai to live in, and the guest bedroom was prepared for Jiang Hai's guests. As sailors, they naturally needed a place for sailors to sleep. Jiang Hai wasn't used to Ai Dehua's clear hierarchy. He told Ai Dehua that they could all be made into guest rooms, but Ai Dehua didn't agree. Jiang Hai could only shrug his shoulders. In fact, sometimes it felt good to enjoy privileges. Behind the 8 rooms was the kitchen. This kitchen wasn't much worse than the kitchen in Jiang Hai's villa. It basically had everything, but it was different from the kitchen at home. Everything here couldn't be moved. They were all either on the ground or welded to the wall. After all, this was the sea. Even the Titanic could sink, so a 40-meter-long fishing boat was nothing. Therefore, it was never wrong to be careful. In the lower level of these residences was the part of the fishing boat that truly resembled a fishing boat. The lower level connected to the plate armor was 4 huge warehouses. 2 were cold storage, 1 was a live reservoir for the valuable fish, and 1 was a pure cold storage for frozen fish. The size of these 4 warehouses wasn't small. At least dozens of tons of fish wouldn't be a problem. Walking into the residential area, Jiang Hai went straight to the kitchen and used the coffee machine there to make coffee. He made 3 cups at once. He held 1 cup for himself and then took the other cup to the steering room. He didn't forget that Ai Dehua hadn't drunk it yet. Walking into the cockpit, he saw Ai Dehua driving the ship while looking at the underwater sonar and the pressure reading of the fishing net on the side of the cockpit. This was not the first time Jiang Hai had entered the cockpit, but he had to admit that he felt a headache every time he came in. These instruments and the like were really troublesome. If he hadn't properly studied them, just looking at these hundreds of buttons would make him feel nauseous. The various instruments, positioning, and broadcast made him feel a headache just by looking at them. "Hey boss, thanks." Hearing the footsteps, Ai Dehua looked back and saw Jiang Hai walking in with coffee. He also chuckled, then took his cup and continued to look at the data in front of him. "How's it going?" Jiang Hai certainly didn't understand, but at this time as the boss he had to ask and pretend to know. So Jiang Hai thought about it and said to Edward Anderson in front of him, "Not bad, the things in the net now are more than before. Although the sea here is not deep, there are a lot of good things. In 10 minutes we can set up the net." Pointing to the shadow shown on the sonar and the pressure bar from the net, Edward Anderson said with a smile. But just as he was joking, his face suddenly changed because 2 black bars suddenly floated over on the sonar map. According to the sonar display, these 2 black bars were estimated to be about 4 meters long. These 2 black bars were rushing in the direction of the fishing net at this time. "What's this? A big fish?" Looking at the reading displayed on the sonar, even Ai Dehua was a little confused. At this time, the figure in front of him didn't seem to notice and plunged into Jiang Hai's fishing net. This huge impact even made the boat shake a little, and at this time the reading of the fishing net increased a lot in an instant. Seeing this, Ai Dehua immediately grabbed the walkie-talkie and was about to ask Philemon to set up the net. His sixth sense told him that he caught a big fish, but before he could say anything, Philemon had already set up the fishing net on the deck. Philemon had been paying attention to the pressure of the fishing net since the beginning. When the pressure of the fishing net suddenly rose from 220 to 270, he knew that it was either a big fish or a reef. No matter what, he needed to get the fishing net up immediately. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't have time to drink coffee. He immediately ran out of the cabin and came to the surface. Ai Dehua also slowly stopped the boat and came to the deck. When the two arrived on the deck, Philemon had already controlled the crane to pull up the fishing net. The fishing net, which was bigger than the previous one, was slowly being lifted out of the sea. At this time, a huge sailfish was constantly struggling in the fishing net. Its sharp mouth had already stretched out of the fishing net. Looking at this big guy, Jiang Hai's mouth unconsciously opened. This was the first time he saw a sailfish in his life and it looked really fierce. Bang bang. At this time, on the sea level beside the boat, a shark also jumped out of the sea. Jiang Hai looked back and knew that this shark was his pet, big idiot. He didn't expect that he just casually said that he was going to catch a fish, and it really caught a sailfish. "Boss, we're rich this time. This fish alone can be sold for $100,000. Philemon, who was controlling the crane to slowly move towards the pool, couldn't help but shout loudly when he saw the fish. $100,000? Hearing Philemon's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but swallow. It seems that raising fish is really a profitable job. A fish can be sold for $100,000? He already felt that his breathing was a little rapid. Could it be that he had never thought about the problem of whether he could raise this fish? As for Ai Dehua, when he looked at the fish, his eyes were also shining, but when he saw Jiang Hai's sand tiger shark, his eyes shone even brighter. He didn't expect Jiang Hai's pet to be so awesome. "I have to go back to Chengdu in the next 2 days, so I'll post it on time. If there's a mistake, please leave me a message in the book review and comments section. I'll sort it out when I come back. Finally, I'll ask for your support and collection." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.